Overnight, the world faced a sudden shutdown of all water and electricity. Temperatures dropped drastically to between -60 and 70 degrees Celsius. Sadly, over 90% of the world's population perished from freezing. After enduring weeks of extreme cold, those who survived found themselves trapped in their homes without water or electricity. With no food and no means to keep warm, everyone eventually succumbed to starvation. Zhang Yi is the only person who got ready for the end of the world and now lives comfortably. Let's rewind to how it began. In December 2050, a star explosion triggered an ice age on Earth. Zhang Yi worked at a supermarket warehouse, which allowed him to gather plenty of food. During the apocalypse, the girl Zhang Yi liked broke into his house with some neighbors and took all his food. She confessed that she tricked him into opening the door. On his deathbed, Zhang Yi swore that if he found her in hell, he would get his revenge. Somehow, Zhang Yi finds himself 1 month back in time before everything happened. Surprised, he vows not to be fooled by the girl anymore. He plans to seek revenge on those who wronged him and take pleasure in seeing his neighbors suffer. With only 1 month until extreme cold sets in, his top priority is to gather supplies and build a safe shelter to survive during the apocalypse. While contemplating his strategy, Zhang Yi experiences a strange phenomenon. He discovers he can teleport things to a different dimension, like in a video game. His plan is to stockpile an entire Walmart's worth of food, ensuring he never runs out. With only 1 month left before the apocalypse, Zhang Yi wants to quickly eat all the delicious food. Otherwise, he won't have a chance in the future. He splurges on a lavish meal at a fancy restaurant, charging it to his credit card, confident that his problems will soon be solved. The girl he had feelings for, Yu Qing, who betrayed him in his past life, notices his extravagant spending. Her friend remarks that she's lucky because Zhang Yi does everything for her, and he must be from a wealthy family. Yu Qing, who had deceived him before, appeared innocent but ended up taking everything from him, including his trust. Zhang Yi wants to confront her immediately, but knows it would lead to trouble. He decides to bide his time until the end of the world to take action. Zhang Yi shows his bank card to the girls and invites them to go shopping at the supermarket. He uses them to help carry things and to show he has money. They agree happily, hoping to gain something from it. Wondering why he's buying so much food, they ask him. Zhang Yi responds, "You never know when an apocalypse might happen. It's good to be prepared." The two girls complain that he's not carrying anything, and they're doing him a favor. Now, Zhang Yi owes them a fancy dinner. Inside, Zhang Yi laughs coldly, tells them he'll treat them well next month since he's been busy lately. At the building entrance, Aunt Lin, with her grandson, says, "You can't finish all of that alone. Why don't you split some of them with me?" After this, the 5-year-old grandson grabs a chocolate from his shopping cart. Zhang Yi takes it back, saying, "Sorry, I'll eat it all by myself." The child starts cursing at Zhang Yi. "I will slap you if you say another word." The kid starts crying immediately. Lin asks what he's doing, saying it's not right for an adult to fight with a child. She offers to buy the chocolate and transfer the money later, but Zhang Yi insists on receiving payment immediately. He shows his QR code and says, "Not later now," or go to the market to buy it. He leaves, leaving Aunt Lin angry. Arriving home, Yu Qing winks at him, and the two remind him not to forget about them. Zhang Yi slams the door in those two gold diggers' faces. After dismissing the two, Zhang Yi stored all the purchased food to check if it would spoil over time. He still had much to do, like building an impenetrable fortress with heating devices and medical supplies. It would also help if he could acquire some weapons. The Ice Age was looming with only a month remaining. He needed to sell everything quickly and acquire more supplies. The following day, as he inspected the stored food, Zhang Yi found that vegetables, meat, and living fish couldn't be preserved, but the food remained fresh. Filled with this knowledge, he called the best local restaurant and ordered 500 full meals for delivery, explaining that he was hosting a 3-day, 3-night feast and needed a large quantity of food. His next move was to locate his property deed and visit the bank to mortgage his apartment. Knowing that money would soon lose its value after the apocalypse, Zhang Yi opted for a loan, using his apartment as collateral. He planned to repay the loan within 3 months. Despite the manager warning about high interest rates, Zhang Yi didn't seem bothered. He secured a loan of 4 million and agreed to pay back 7 million in 3 months, or else risk losing his house and car. After that, he visited the top security company. A manager approached and offered assistance. Zhang Yi explained his idea of constructing a secure shelter for the apocalypse. The manager showed different plans for him to choose from. He insisted on using aviation-grade materials for reinforcement, bulletproof glass for the balcony, and installing an air filtration system along with a 360-degree surveillance system without any blind spots. He also requested the front door to be as strong as bank vault doors. Additionally, he inquired about acquiring some weapons. The manager was surprised by these requests, especially the need for weapons. He assured him that he could arrange everything except for the weapons. Zhang Yi envisioned the house turning into a fortress with these upgrades. The total cost for the final plan was over 8 million, and the work will begin soon. Next, he needed to obtain some weapons for self-defense. He called the owner of a hunting club and managed to get some crossbows as weapons. As soon as he returned home, the 500 full meals he had ordered also arrived on several trucks. This caught the attention of many people in the neighborhood, as they were delivery trucks from a 5-star hotel, which would cost at least 1 million or so. Yu Qing plans to trick him into proposing to her, just so she could enjoy the money. But Zhang Yi knows the devil's motives. After some time, his house was filled. Wasting no time, he put everything into storage space. Basically, he wouldn't need to worry about delicious food for years of his life. The following day, the workers from the security company arrived to begin constructing the safe house. This spectacle drew the attention of numerous neighbors, who teased Zhang Yi, questioning if he had taken the wrong medicine. But he paid no mind, convinced that when the time came, they would see who had the last laugh. Later, he visited his company's manager and purchased a portion of the medicine supplies, offering double the market price to secure priority in buying everything, even items already promised to other companies. He also plans to take all the Walmart stocks in less than a week. On his way back home, he saw Yu Qing flirting around with another guy. She also spread words that Zhang Yi made her carry heavy stuff that got her back pains. His recent actions of stockpiling and renovation also caught the eye of Yu Qing, who inquired if something was about to happen. She mentioned she had been thinking about him a lot lately. However, Zhang Yi chose not to dignify Yu Qing's fake concern with a response, which left her irritated. Zhang Yi, who used to comply with all her requests, now ignored her, much to the amusement of her best friend. She remarked that if something significant were happening, the authorities would surely inform the public. Her plan was to charm the newly wealthy Zhang Yi for their mutual benefit. A week later, Zhang Yi obtained an expensive weapon. His emergency medicines have also been delivered to the hotel he was staying at. He received a message that his safe house construction has been completed. This project was successfully carried out with all the little details not left out, from the ventilation system to the bulletproof windows. The company also installed surveillance systems on every floor of the building. Zhang Yi was very pleased with the service and was told to pay all the money within 3 months. He agrees but coldly laughs inside that there's no way he'll pay all that money once the apocalypse descends. Now, only one last batch of supplies arrived, with several trucks of drinking water arriving successively. One of the delivery drivers was his Uncle Yu, who lives in his neighborhood. He seemed curious as to why his nephew ordered so many gallons of drinking water. In his past life, Uncle Yu was one of the few good people who helped a dying mother with her son. So he whispered to him that the weather this year is going to be very cold, so you should stock up on supplies to prepare as soon as possible. Hearing this, Uncle Yu couldn't help but take it seriously. But his friend pulled him away, stating that he shouldn't believe Zhang Yi. But you trust Zhang Yi. In the upcoming weeks, Zhang Yi used his time to buy resources, gather extra supplies, and practice archery every day. With just 3 days remaining until the extreme cold set in, the weather was already strange. The big moment arrived. Zhang Yi, the stock supervisor, brewed tea at his workplace and invited all his colleagues for a break. After they had finished their drinks, an hour later, everyone dozed off. With the surveillance cameras switched off, Zhang Yi took advantage of the opportunity to silently gather all the resources from the Walmart warehouse: fuel, food, and equipment. He quickly emptied the warehouse. Among the items, one box caught his attention. Cold-resistant equipment recently purchased by the company, capable of withstanding temperatures as low as -100 degrees. To carry out his perfect plan, Zhang Yi drank a special tea that made him fall asleep and then joined his co-workers. When he woke up 2 hours later, one of his employees told him that they were facing a problem. The warehouse had been robbed and everything was gone. Zhang Yi acted surprised, wondering aloud how all the warehouse items could have disappeared. The manager phoned him, asking about the stolen supplies. Knowing that the entire warehouse had been cleared out with no evidence left behind, and even the cameras hadn't caught anything, the manager immediately accused the supervisor of being involved in the theft. Zhang Yi nervously smiled and denied any involvement, saying he wasn't skilled enough to pull off such a scheme. Everyone was taken to the police station to give their statements, but no new information came up. How would they ever figure out that the warehouse had been teleported? After the questioning, the police officer warned everyone not to leave the city under any circumstances because each person was seen as a suspect. Zhang Yi, with a hint of spite, said he wouldn't even leave his house. The event on December 10th was big news in the city. People couldn't believe that tons of supplies had vanished without a trace in less than 3 hours. It was also the day heavy snowfall started falling from the sky. Zhang Yi felt this was the beginning of a cold apocalypse. 3 days later, while at home, a shockwave from a supernova explosion wreaked havoc on the whole planet. The temperature dropped rapidly overnight. Looking at the heavy snow through the window, Zhang Yi remarked that this time the result would be different. The people in the apartment owners group were feeling worried. It was the first time they had seen such heavy snowfall in the city. Zhang Yi noticed that many in the group were experiencing snow for the first and possibly the last time. In his previous experience, a heavy snowstorm lasted for 3 months, with temperatures dropping dangerously low. This led to unfortunate deaths for those who hadn't prepared enough food in advance. On the second day of the severe cold snap, the thick snow had already piled up to a height of 1 meter at the entrance of the residential area. Despite cranking up the heater to the maximum, people inside their houses still shivered from the cold. However, Zhang Yi, who had prepared several pieces of heating equipment beforehand, felt comfortably warm. After a good sleep, Zhang Yi was awakened by the ringing of his phone. It was a call from Yuqing, asking if Zhang Yi knew about the sudden temperature drop, given his habit of stocking up on supplies every day for the past few months, and wondering why he hadn't informed her, knowing how much she liked him. She complained of being freezing cold and resorting to eating instant noodles. Hearing this, Zhang Yi laughed and hung up the phone, leaving the annoyed Yuqing on the other end. She boldly sent a message asking for food, and seizing the chance, Zhang Yi decided to playfully tease her. He sent her a picture of a juicy steak with a glass of wine, which she quickly recognized as high-quality Wagyu beef and an expensive French wine. Suddenly craving a tasty meal, she asked Zhang Yi if she could have it, but his response was that if she wanted it, she had to go to the market and buy it herself. Despite feeling angry, she calmed down because she needed to please Zhang Yi to be able to visit his place too. After that, he just ignored her and went back to enjoying his meal. It was at that moment, while watching the building surveillance cameras on his iPad, that he saw the scene. Lin, the building manager, was advising people not to panic or fight over food. She assured them that the extreme weather would last at most 2 or 3 days and that the neighborhood committee would assist everyone during this time. Lin warned against excessive hoarding of supplies, stating that it was prohibited and would be reported to the authorities if discovered. However, Zhang Yi questioned how she could be certain that the heavy snowfall wouldn't last long. Other residents also wanted to know, expressing concerns that if they didn't stock up on supplies now, Aunt Lin would be to blame if they ran out of food. Lin then stated that the neighborhood committee would take responsibility for this issue, then pointed to Zhang Yi to divert attention, just to tell him not to cause trouble. He didn't care about the threats and went back to his super safe house. Days passed, and the snow continued to fall outside. Aunt Lin asked young Zhang Yi, a member of the building group, to clear the snow from the building's entrance. Zhang Yi responded that it would be futile, comparing it to trying to dry a river with a bucket. Declining Lin's request, Zhang Yi suggested she seek assistance from wealthy residents in the neighborhood. Lin became furious, interpreting Zhang Yi's suggestion as a provocation. In frustration, she stated that, on behalf of the neighborhood committee, this is an order, and anyone who opposes it will be blamed by the committee for any problems. He questioned why Lin hadn't reached out to the wealthy residents in the neighborhood for assistance instead. He recommended that Lin ask Chun Zheng for advice on clearing the snow. Chun Zheng is a construction boss who has workers specifically for this kind of job. Su Hao, who lives on the 8th floor, comes from a wealthy and well-known family. They have connections with important people. Lin decided to message both group members to help clear the snow, mentioning them in the chat. When Chun Zheng saw the message, he became immediately upset with Lin and Zhang Yi, feeling like they were acting as if they owned the place. Su Hao sent a voice message to the group saying it wasn't his concern and he didn't have to work. Then he sent a picture to show how busy he was. Lin was very angry at Su Hao's response, but didn't question anything. Instead, she blamed Zhang Yi for the confusion. Zhang Yi didn't bother responding and ignored the conversation. Lin was so mad that she called Zhang Yi directly to complain. He threatened her that if she kept talking nonsense and bothering him, he would harm her. Trembling with fear, she hung up and didn't say anything more in the group. While he was eating, a loud noise came from the front door. Chun Zheng was outside, shouting angrily, "You are acting all tough in the chat, turning others against me in the group. I'm going to get you now, punk." Reacting quickly, Zhang Yi grabbed his bow and headed for the door. Chun Zheng was kicking at the door aggressively. Zhang Yi took aim through the door crack. Initially targeting his chest, Zhang Yi reconsidered. He didn't want to end things too quickly. That would be dull. Instead, he aimed for Chun Zheng's leg and let the arrow fly. Peeking through the peephole, Zhang Yi saw Chun Zheng writhing in pain on the floor. If left untreated, Chun Zheng's leg could be permanently crippled. Chun Zheng fled in pain, shocked that the little troublemaker nearly ended his life. With the cold weather, Chun Zheng could die if not treated in time. Infection could slowly claim him. Terrified, he dialed emergency services, but the heavy snow made any help impossible. So, he resolved to treat himself, taking advantage of the numbness from the cold to remove the arrow from his leg. Then picked up the phone again to threaten Zhang Yi in the group chat, telling him that "I will definitely kill you." Zhang Yi responded confidently, asking him who he thinks he is dare to provoke me again, and I will cripple your other leg. This exchange shocked the onlookers in the chat group. Nobody in the area dared challenge Chun Zheng. This was the first direct confrontation. Enraged, Chun Zheng summoned all his employees to the building, armed and ready for retaliation. Before long, a crowd of people, each wielding their own weapon, gathered at his house. The bald guy led all the gangs to Zhang Yi's house. They were angry and wanted to kill him for disrespecting their boss. They started attacking the wooden door, but the bald guy's knife broke. He realized the door was made of metal and wondered how many enemies Zhang Yi had. It seemed like his house was more secure than a bank. Watching from security cameras, Zhang Yi noticed the attackers looked weak and hungry. This made him think of a plan. Zhang Yi grabbed a water hose from the kitchen and turned it on. The workers outside, not understanding what was happening, thought it was safe since it wasn't an arrow. But the hose sprayed cold water on them. Many fell to the frozen ground, and only a few escaped. Zhang Yi felt satisfied with the outcome. In such freezing weather, cold water was more dangerous than weapons. In Chun Zheng's house, 3 people who managed to escape gathered together, shivering from the cold. Chun Zheng, feeling angry, demanded to know what had occurred. They revealed that they had failed to capture the boy because he had outsmarted them by installing a strong steel door that couldn't be broken into easily. Additionally, he had sprayed cold water on them through a hole in the door. Chun Zheng declared that Zhang Yi couldn't hide forever and ordered some men to guard his door continuously. If Zhang Yi attempted to leave his room, they were instructed to eliminate him immediately. At the entrance of the building, Uncle Yu led a group of people to clear the snow blocking the way into the residential area. Their plan was to create a path to the supermarket for restocking food. However, they soon realized that, as Zhang Yi had warned, they couldn't shovel as fast as the snow was falling. After some time, they gave up and decided to head back. Watching their efforts, Zhang Yi remarked that human strength couldn't match the force of such a large snowfall, despite the reassuring messages on television claiming the country was winning against the snow disaster. Zhang Yi alone knew the grim truth. 95% of the global population had frozen to death in this catastrophic snowstorm. Meanwhile, his former crush messaged him, expressing concern for his well-being. Zhang Yi reassured her that he was fine, to which she responded that she was running out of food and reminded him that he had stocked up. "Share some with me," she requested, adding, "I'll treat you to dinner after the snow clears." Shortly after, Zhang Yi sent her a photo of a lobster, claiming it was already on the dinner table. Seeing this, she became annoyed, saying that's why he's still single, and decided that his chances with her were now over. Her best friend also seized the moment to message Zhang Yi, informing him that he had upset Yu Qing. In response, Zhang Yi dismissed the situation as insignificant drama. However, Yu Qing's best friend urged him to consider helping them and suggested that he might even win Yu Qing's affection in the process. "Isn't it worth a try?" she asked, emphasizing that the snow wouldn't last forever. Zhang Yi ignores the two little witches and simply responds with an "oh." This angers the friend even more. This loser has suddenly become so arrogant. Yu Qing gives up trying to understand why this loser's attitude changed so suddenly. They decide to approach another person with less money. Yu Qing contacts another person, Zhou Peng. He quickly arrives, bringing a large bag of supplies, claiming it's all the food he has. After taking the package, her friend slams the door in his face. From the little rat's expression, it's clear she doesn't even care. She's solely focused on getting revenge on Zhang Yi for ignoring her. 3 days went by, and the snow kept piling up. Zhang Yi was feasting on a chicken drumstick, while waiting for the real drama to begin. Suddenly, the electricity was cut off, plunging all the buildings into darkness. Before long, neighbors began coming out of their homes asking each other if they had electricity. Now, with water and electricity cut off, the heaters no longer work. The cold became so intense that staying under blankets felt life-threatening. Zhang Yi finished his chicken, picked his teeth, and then proceeded to start up the generator he had either purchased or stolen. Neighborhood committee member Aunt Lin is shaking as she cuddles her grandson, never expecting the snowstorm to last this long. A message pops up in the group that only she has, claiming this is a global snowstorm that happens only once every 100,000 years. It suggests we might be facing a mass extinction, with several major cities already affected. The message urges everyone to stock up on more supplies. Aunt Lin is stunned by this revelation. She never imagined the snow disaster would be so severe. Later, she devises a plan to trick people into giving up their food before they find out about the crisis. Aunt Lin shares a message in the owner group, reassuring everyone not to worry. She explains that the current disaster causing water and power interruptions is temporary, and workers are working on fixing it. The authorities have issued a special order due to the unusual circumstances. The neighborhood committee will now oversee all property owners. Those who refuse to cooperate will face arrest and police questioning. Seeing this message, everyone becomes dissatisfied, especially Chen Zheng. Despite his influence, he knows he must obey police orders. Meanwhile, Lin continues in the group chat, informing everyone that due to the seriousness of the snowstorm, the neighborhood committee has decided to collect supplies from each owner and distribute them equally to everyone to help overcome this crisis. Upon reading this, Zhang Yi remembers that she did the same thing in the past and stole food from all the residents. Lin made a mistake by privately messaging Zhang Yi, saying, "My nephew, you work in the warehouse. I saw you last time buying 3 truckloads of stuff. You must have stocked up a lot of food. It's your turn to do your part." Zhang Yi, angry, immediately replied with an audio message. "That's great, Auntie Lin. If you collect more supplies, remember to give me some." Hearing this audio made Lin almost have a heart attack from anger. How could he have ruined everything so quickly? But realizing that she and her grandson are in dire condition and depend on Zhang, she calms down and responds kindly. "This is an order from the organization. You have to obey. After the snow passes, I will report your good deeds to the organization." If Zhang Yi hadn't died the last time in his life, he would have believed her. So he responds while picking his teeth, "And I'm not lying. I have nothing to eat at home, and I'm hungry. How about you send me some instant noodles, please? Upon hearing this, Lin couldn't hold back and replied to Zhang Yi, refusing to surrender your supplies is the same as going against the organization. I will definitely report you all. Zhang Yi dismissed her and said she was nothing. This made Lin so nervous that she slammed her phone against the wall, furious with Zhang Yi after not getting any advantage. Lin focused on the other owners. If she could deceive some of them, it would be enough. 2 days later, following Lin's deceitful actions, several owners sent their supplies to the old lady's house. Witnessing this, Zhang Yi thought that everyone was foolish for trusting someone in this post-apocalyptic world. After so much time, the whole world must be in turmoil with not enough food available. People could only wait to starve or hunt for food. Many owners began tagging Lin in the chat, asking about the supplies that were supposed to be distributed equally. Many of us have no food at home. I want food or I'll eat you, Lin. The crooked trustee responded to the demands, mocking, "You idiots, these supplies were obtained through my hard work. Why should I give them away?" In the midst of this, her phone rang, and upon seeing it was Chun Zheng, she began to sweat nervously. Chun Zheng coldly questioned Lin about the situation, accusing her of tricking everyone into sending their supplies to her house. Lin feigned innocence, attributing the arrangement to the community committee and claiming she was merely fulfilling her duty. Chun Zheng seized upon this opportunity, revealing that 10 of them are waiting for her to distribute the supplies. Hearing this, Lin tried to argue, saying, "These supplies have not been sorted yet. Some owners have not yet handed in their supplies, so we cannot start distributing them yet." Chun Zheng, accompanied by his starving companions, stormed her house. There is no more law in this chaos, and he smacks the old lady in the face. Today he will be the justice. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi observed everything on the surveillance cameras, calmly munching on a sausage. He got the idea to record the commotion at Lin's house and share it in the building's group chat. Seeing that they were taking all the food and leaving nothing behind, she tried to stop Chun Zheng. "Some of the supplies here were the ones I personally stocked, and we need them to survive. How will she and her grandson make it?" Chun Zheng didn't care and kicked the old lady. Shocked, the grandson grabbed a knife to defend his grandmother and ended up stabbing someone in the booty. In pain, the person kicked the boy in the chest while others laughed. Chun Zheng showed no concern and even said that this is what the two deserve for deceiving us. "We are just delivering justice." In the group chat for residents, everyone was watching and enjoying it. When Zhang Yi read the messages, he remarked that those people didn't understand the seriousness of the situation. Today, Chun Zheng invaded Old Lady Lin's house. Tomorrow, he may invade yours. But since all of this is none of his business, he says he doesn't care. Later, Lin reached out in the group chat asking for help. She desperately needed hemostatic drugs, anti-shock drugs, and antibiotics for her grandson who had been injured by Chun Zheng. Dr. Zhou needed the medications urgently for the boy's surgery. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yi's eyes widened. Dr. Zhou was a kind doctor in his past life. Lin pleaded for medicine, promising gratitude to anyone who could provide it. However, the residents only responded with laughter. No one was willing to believe or offer assistance. Seeing this, Zhang Yi couldn't help but think it was karma. The snowstorm outside lasted for more than a week, freezing almost everything in its path, covering the entire ground floor. Many people have heard from the news that this was a global snowstorm that occurs once every 100,000 years. The entire world was almost buried in the snowstorm, especially in some northern cities. The temperature dropped to -100 degrees Celsius. Unfortunately, many residents who attempted to flee to the south ended up freezing to death along the way. In the residents group, Lin once again pleaded for assistance. "My dear grandson has been hungry for 2 days. He's just a child. Are you going to sit there and watch him die?" Moved by her plea, the residents began selling packs of instant noodles for $1,000 each, with Lin offering to cover the costs. Su Zhao offers to buy at $2,000 each. Zhang Yi, as always watching everything, found it amusing. People don't understand the apocalypse in front of them. He remarked, "Soon, they'll realize they can't eat money." Meanwhile, Su Zhao, wealthy and well-versed in survival, began purchasing food from those selling it, understanding that money will soon hold no value in this apocalyptic world. A single mother also reached out for help in the group. She shared her desperate situation, explaining how her daughter was on the brink of starvation and appealing to everyone for assistance. Zhang Yi notes that this woman, in his past life with her daughter, survived for a long time, so there's nothing to worry about. It's been 10 days since the freezing cold hit. Zhang Yi, as usual, was at home enjoying the warmth and plenty of food on the table. When the phone rang, he glanced at the caller ID and chuckled. He answered the video call, noticing his friends looked thinner, and joked about their eating habits. The sight of the chicken made them both drool instantly, and they questioned why he still had so much food despite the cold, noticing he was sweating. Zhang Yi mockingly mentioned he has a fireplace at home, explaining it kept him warm, even joking about wanting to go for a run outside for fresh air. Yu Qing, drooling over Zhang Yi, saying he's amazing, asked to take a bath inside with him, expressing her longing for him. Without hesitation, he declined the offer and teased them about their discomfort. This angered the girls instantly. "Don't push it. We're freezing and hungry, and you're not helping. Yet you gossip," Zhang Yi replied, asking if they still saw him as a loser. He advised them to find food elsewhere and quickly ended the call. Yu Qing, furious, threw her phone to the ground. Suddenly, her perception of Zhang Yi shifted. Her loser wasn't a loser anymore. Her best friend still praised Zhang Yi. "This guy is awesome. It's her loss for not enjoying the stuff at his place. Right now he's better than the rich boys they used to hang out with." The two ended up in a fist fight because the girl wouldn't accept being called dumb. Meanwhile, the government stopped concealing the news of the snow disaster and made a TV announcement. To address everyone's electricity needs, power supply would only be accessible during the night. However, the voltage would be enough only for low-power devices since all major power plants are shut down and electricity is scarce. Everyone should rely solely on their cell phones and a lamp or two. Electric showers are not recommended. It's now widely known that the ice disaster has no end date. Yet, amidst despair, there's someone trying to sell a pack of noodles for 5,000. Nonetheless, Zhang Yi remains unbothered, enjoying a glass of wine on his balcony. After a 10-minute argument without harming their friendship, Yu Qing and her friend decided they needed to end Zhang Yi's life and take over his house. However, they knew they couldn't do it alone. Yu Qing picked up the phone and called Zhou Peng, telling a story about how Zhang Yi wanted to smash her at his place just because he had food. Angered by this, Zhou Peng agreed that Zhang Yi deserved retribution. Seeing Zhou Peng's anger, Yu Qing manipulated him further into joining her to rob Zhang Yi's house. In no time, the three of them arrived at his door, each holding a kitchen knife hidden while knocking. Watching everything through the cameras, Zhang Yi spotted the ultimate loser and realized none of them were aware of the cameras. They knocked and asked to trade the medicine they had for food. Angry at their attempt to deceive him, Zhang Yi decided to act aggressively, grabbing the hose to spray water on them and put an end to the issue. However, he changed his mind when he saw the overflowing trash can. He pretended he was about to open the door, which made the three haters happy. But instead of opening the door, he used the hose to spray sewage on them, leaving everything covered in garbage, saying that's the food they deserve. Zhou Peng furiously struck the door, but didn't scratch it. His hand was hurt. Laughing it off, Zhang Yi communicated through the speaker that the door was made of steel and they couldn't open it. After a while, Zhang Yi decided to give up on them and went to sleep. However, he suddenly woke up to the sound of a gunshot. Even though he knew that sooner or later the law of the jungle would be put into practice, the sudden shot still startled him. Checking the surveillance camera images on the tablet, he realized that Chen Zheng and his employees were going from house to house, stealing supplies. Many faced the same fate he had in his past life during the apocalypse. Chen even sent photos of what he could do to the building groups and claimed that he now controlled all the buildings. Watching the situation through the surveillance cameras, a new group was formed where several residents denounced Chen Zheng's actions in the chat, stating the need to go against him soon. Zhang Yi was also added to the group and read the messages, finding amusement in it all. A retired veteran proposed leading an attack against Chen Zheng, receiving support. The veteran uncle suggested that they needed young volunteers to ensure security and weapons. A woman in the chat immediately sent an audio asking, "Aunt Lynn stole from us the other day. Can we trust Uncle and give him weapons?" This divided the residents into two groups, with half wanting to go after Qinzheng and the others just not trusting Uncle. Zhang Yi watched the discussion in the group chat while enjoying delicious meals sometimes and observing through the cameras as Qinzheng stole more and more houses. Zhang Yi decided he should do something to take this guy down. The next morning, a resident who didn't want to help the veteran asked for assistance in the residents' group. His door was being forced open, and he became the next victim. It didn't take long before he was pulled out, and the inevitable occurred. Yu Qing and her friend felt scared and nervous. They realized they needed a plan to avoid being the next targets. Their idea was to inform on Zhang Yi by spreading the news that he had a stockpile of supplies. Their goal was to gather everyone to unite and take over his house. They added him to the new group so he would know, but Zhang Yi didn't seem bothered. When they argued that he should join forces with them to protect themselves from Qinzheng, Zhang Yi simply stated that it's every man for himself, and he doesn't care about anyone. He then left the group chat. This change in Zhang Yi's attitude shocked Yu Qing and the others. How could this guy, who was so passive just 3 months ago, now be so resolute? They began discussing how to break into Zhang Yi's house and steal his supplies. One of the guys claimed he could pick any kind of lock. They decided to try breaking the lock and placed umbrellas so they wouldn't get showered with garbage again. Zhang Yi, monitoring the surveillance cameras, activated the high-voltage defense system, which electrocuted the clever boy, causing instant death. Witnessing this, Zhang Yi felt no remorse for eliminating them. The man wearing glasses pointed angrily at the door, calling Zhang Yi a damn bastard and ordering him to leave his room immediately. Zhang Yi just laughed in response, grabbed his crossbow, and aimed it through the door, hitting the left arm of the man with glasses. The other two rushed to help the injured man, but were also struck by arrows. What a bunch of losers. Yu Qing and the others quickly fled back to their room. The three who were hit by the arrows lay on the ground, groaning in pain. They realized the arrows were rusty, meaning without antibiotics, their lives were in danger. One of the girls slapped Yu Qing and blamed her for the situation. She didn't mention that Zhang Yi had crossbows at home, arguing she didn't know since last time he only sprayed water and garbage. Zhou Peng, always the loser, defended Yu Qing. Meanwhile, the smart guy remembered that the priority was to tend to the wounds. They called, and Dr. Zhou came to check the wounds of the injured people. Surprised, she explained that with the wounds so deep and without professional equipment, they have no chance of survival. Furthermore, she cannot pull out the arrows. It will cause infections, and without antibiotics, it's certain death. The girl, who is a relative of one of the injured individuals, cries at the news and says that Zhang Yi is very cruel and did it on purpose. Until now, Dr. Zhou didn't know who Zhang Yi was. Before leaving, Dr. Zhou tells them to get medicine soon. If they remove the arrows now, it's over for them. The guy with glasses at this point must have gone crazy and said Zhang Yi must get the medicine for them. Yu Qing, thinking for once in her life, remembers that Zhang Yi suddenly changed a lot and started stocking up a lot of stuff at home. She tells the others that Zhang Yi does have medicine because she saw him stocking it before. Furthermore, no one here harmed him. They just wanted to rob his house. But since they failed and only they got hurt, it's his fault. From the corner, the doctor was just listening to these losers talking nonsense. The other girl blames Yu Qing for everything and makes her find a way to persuade Zhang Yi to provide medicine for everyone. This time, even the loser, who usually doesn't agree, realizes that without the medicine, he would also die. The new plan is to call him, and surprisingly, he answers easily. Yu Qing is crying on the phone, explaining that the boys are dying and pleading for his help. Zhang Yi, however, questions why he should assist, believing that people like them should die sooner. The sister of the crazy guy intervenes, asserting that it's Zhang Yi's responsibility to aid them because they will be needed in the future to confront Qinzheng. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi casually prepares a fresh steak. He admits to Yu Qing that he deliberately shot them with rusty arrows, ensuring their demise. To add insult to injury, he refuses to help, but offers Yuqing a place to stay with him instead. At that moment, the bitch takes the phone back and agrees to Zhang Yi's offer. Her friend asks Zhang Yi to join as well, but he sarcastically replied that Yuqing is the only one he loves. He even urged Yuqing to cut ties with the other people who were holding them back. Yuqing happily agreed, stating that Zhang Yi had the final say. She did as he said. She immediately started running, leaving her friend behind. Her best friend tried to stop her, but she got pissed off and let go of her hand. The other lady angrily slapped her and called her a bitch who caused them so much pain. And now she's trying to run away? Zhou Peng was hurt by his crush's actions. He reminded her that she hated Zhang Yi the most and wanted to be his woman instead. Yuqing responds that there's nothing wrong with seeking her happiness. She explains that she was only temporarily working with them. She convinced the loser to let her be happy if he really loves her, especially now that he can't provide anything for her. The simp's sister consoles him after the heartbreak. Fang Yuqing, why should you receive all the benefits? The friend intervenes and tackles her to the ground. The two women agree not to let Yuqing go because she's being selfish. Meanwhile, Dr. Zhou tells the boys that she only gave them temporary treatment for their wounds. Without proper medication, infections are likely to develop later on, so they need to be prepared. The boy with glasses hasn't given up. He tells everyone that he still has a plan to deal with Zhang Yi. He starts by mentioning that there's a fireplace in Zhang Yi's home, indicating he has stockpiled a lot of fuel. Additionally, the video shows plenty of food in his room. It's clear they can't confront him directly now, so it's better to spread the news so the entire unit knows. This means hundreds of people, along with Chun Zheng, will gather to raid Zhang Yi's house to get a share of the resources. This idea angers Yuqing, who had planned to live with Zhang Yi. She's only concerned about her own selfish future, despite being the cause of all this trouble. She was almost slapped again, but was defended by the boy she had hurt. His sister tries to reason with him, saying he's defending a woman who broke his heart and threw herself in the arms of another man. But the boy insists he truly loves Yuqing and believes that by impressing her every time, he can win her over eventually. What a hopeless romantic. The loser tells the bitch to not be afraid. He'll always be there for her. Wang is angry about this and decides to write in the group to let all the neighbors know that some people are still living a very luxurious life, which she thinks is selfish and shameless. She also sent photos and videos showing Zhang Yi's luxurious lifestyle and asked everyone to talk about how they should deal with this situation. Chun Zhen and his friends crave for the food in the pictures. Chun Zheng wants to use this chance to settle old scores with Zhang Yi. Everyone flooded Zhang Yi's phone with messages. Some accused him of selfishness, while Aunt Lin, threatening her authority as head of the neighborhood committee, demanded that he relinquish all his resources to her for redistribution. Meanwhile, Su Hao proposed moving into Zhang Yi's house, offering his assets valued at over $1 billion in return. Amidst this barrage of texts, Zhang Yi calmly enjoyed a tasty home-cooked meal. Reflecting on the accusations, he couldn't help but think about how these people chopped him for dinner in his past life. Rather than engaging with their irrational demands, he chose to focus on his meal, leaving others to wonder if he feared their threats. Aunt Lin and other hungry neighbors branded him a selfish and stubborn individual for not sharing his resources. Zhang Yi found amusement in their messages as he relaxed in his fortress-like home, even indulging in a glass of red wine to ease his laughter-induced sore throat. After a long day full of drama, Zhang Yi feels bored staying at home every day. He wants to go out in the snow. He recalls having a few snowmobiles in storage. Even though it's not possible for him to leave now, he's optimistic that in the future, when he's safe and secure, he'll be able to go out and enjoy the fresh air. Suddenly, he receives a text from Dr. Zhou informing him that her food and medicine supplies have run out. He recalls from his past life that Dr. Zhou died because she gave her last food to a lady who had a daughter. Zhang Yi is thinking about letting her take care of him, but he's concerned that if she's too smart, she might betray him more easily. Right now, his biggest fear is death. Even though he thinks about taking her, he still chooses to check if she's loyal. He tells her she needs to offer him something valuable in return. Dr. Zhou, who's never begged before, feels like she has no other option. Zhang Yi promises her food and medicine, but asks for a favor in return. He He wants her to keep an eye on their neighbors who might attack him soon and inform him immediately. Whether she agrees or not, her best hope for survival lies with Zhang Yi. Dr. Zhou agrees to his request, which gets our boy really excited. People in the group chat are still angry with Zhang Yi because he's ignoring their threatening messages. Chun Zheng texts everyone, saying he won't attack anyone for now. Their main focus is dealing with Zhang Yi, who likely has more supplies than everyone else combined. Chun Zheng wants half of the supplies once they succeed, and the boy with glasses supports this, urging everyone to unite against Zhang Yi. Dr. Zhou and Uncle Yu quickly decide to let Zhang Yi know what's going on. Zhou mentioned they watched the video and got really upset. Everyone in the neighborhood is getting ready to head to Zhang Yi's house. Zhang Yi warns Zhou to steer clear of the gathering as he prepares to confront them. The furious crowd, armed to the teeth, is ready to finally take down Zhang Yi. They surround his door, pounding it with a mighty force similar to Thor's hammer. Zhang Yi, observing from his security camera feed, happily notes how Chun Zheng and Sun Shi are leading their followers to their doom. He triggers a high-voltage security system, zapping some of the people to their demise. This leaves the remaining residents trembling in fear. The fleeing attackers inform Chun Zheng of their losses, prompting him to aim his gun at one of them, demanding to know where they are running to. The boy wearing glasses keeps on insulting Zhang Yi without taking any fighting action like the others. He assures everyone not to worry, promising warmth and plenty of food once they break through his door. He mentions enduring cold and hunger for over a month, emphasizing that their fight will be worthwhile even if it leads to their death. His words inspire more people to start banging on Zhang Yi's door with heavy weapons. Inside the room, Zhang listens to the noise while sipping his wine. Then he starts playing music on his large speakers. This only infuriates his enemies outside even more, until they grow tired of trying to break his door. They can't fathom why Zhang Yi's door is so unbreakable. One person, with remarkable insight, examines the door and announces that it's a security door from a bank vault. "Oh no! Is there no way to open it?" Another person exclaimed. The genius continues, explaining that this high-security door cannot be blown open, not even with a bomb. Without the correct key or being an expert lockpicker, there's no chance of getting through. While the person was still speaking, Zhang Yi swiftly shot an arrow, hitting the person in the throat. Seeing this sudden violence, bystanders began to panic, scrambling for safety. Using his arrows, Zhang Yi defies the laws of physics, targeting and killing people who weren't even directly in front of his door. After confirming that Zhang Yi's door is made of unbreakable metal, a woman suggests breaking his wall. This false hope excites everyone. They waste no time and start breaking the walls around the door. The boy with glasses is thrilled because he wants to defeat Zhang Yi so badly. As the guy with the hammer hits the wall, his hand hurts because it's a hard surface. It turns out the wall is reinforced with metal. Others struggle to accept this truth. They try different sides of the wall, but it's all reinforced with steel. Inside the room, Zhang Yi laughs at his enemy's desperation. He's confident that even bullets can't penetrate his wall. People outside started wondering why someone would construct such a peculiar house. Some recalled seeing him renovating, but they never imagined it would end up like this. The boy with glasses angrily concluded that Zhang Yi must have known about the snowstorm, but chose to keep it secret. He branded him a despicable villain who only cared about himself. "What's the use of living alone?" he exclaimed, echoing the sentiments of others who cursed Zhang and wishing him bad luck. However, Chun Zheng intervened, urging everyone not to lose hope. Despite the reinforced walls, there were still the ceiling and the floor as potential points of entry. Organizing two groups, Chun Zheng assigned them the task of breaking through the floor and ceiling. While watching, Zhang Yi said, "Chun Zheng is very clever, but unfortunately, I'm not foolish." Before long, both groups realized that there was steel both in the ceiling and on the floor. This wasted effort only increased hunger among the people, causing them to view each other as potential food. Some started feeling overheated due to excessive work. The boy with glasses became paranoid, unsure of what to do next. As if that weren't enough, another person suggested trying the balcony, given its large sliding glass door. The boys quickly acted upon this suggestion, while Zhang Yi observed from his own glass door. As they began to break the glass, Zhang Yi ignited his low-budget bomb and threw it at them, using I don't know what kind of physics. He finds pleasure in watching their struggle. One of the guys who was burning throws himself off the building. Zhang Yi watched everything without feeling guilty. The others tried to return to the apartment next door, but their friends stopped them, fearing they might also get burned. They started pushing them away, causing some to fall off the planks. Those who managed to stay didn't waste the chance to get a bit of warmth. Later on, the other residents came back to Zhang Yi's balcony, standing outside the glass and pleading for food. But Zhang Yi didn't show any compassion. Instead, he decided to aggravate them by flaunting warm pasta, making their mouths water. He even placed the pasta on a table right before them. With his cold attitude, Zhang Yi announced that whoever delivers Chun Zheng's head will earn a week of free noodles. Upon hearing this, all eyes turned eagerly toward Chun Zheng in the neighboring apartment. Chun Zheng was puzzled over what Zhang Yi had said to them. Even those who had been behind him began to regard him differently after reading the group message offering a week's worth of food for Chun Zheng's demise. Fearing for his life, Chun Zheng made the decision to flee. Two men resolved to chase after him, but before they could draw near, Chun Zheng struck first, killing them both. One of Chun Zheng's associates noticed and informed him that he had been stabbed. Upon returning to their quarters, Chun Zheng called Dr. Zhou to come and tend to his wound. When Dr. Zhou arrived and began treating him, she mentioned that her services wouldn't be free. Chun Zheng suggested she join them for a meal, but upon seeing the food, she refused, preferring to go hungry. Chun Zheng emphasized the importance of having a doctor in today's world and assured Dr. Zhou that he wouldn't harm her and started touching. Dr. Zhou slaps away his filthy hand and questions his motives. Later, Chun Zheng and his team began to plan their next move. His followers were at a breaking point after trying so hard to capture Zhang Yi but failed. After listening to the conversation, Dr. Zhou got up. When asked where she was going, she said she needed the bathroom. Using this chance, she messaged Zhang Yi that his enemies planned to move next door. It didn't take long before Chun Zheng and his group took over the neighboring room. The occupants thought they had fled, but they were soon caught in the corridor and taken out by Chun Zheng's men. Chun Zheng was pleased because it was their only remaining food for them, while Dr. Zhou was filled with panic. Inside Wang Min's house, the boy with glasses and his friend are in bad shape. Their injuries are getting worse due to infection. They're crying out for help, but Wang Min says she can't assist them right now. As days pass, Chun Zheng is running out of food and bullets, but the mission to capture Zhang Yi remains unchanged. Zhang Yi labels Chun as a coward who intimidates a bunch of folks into being his henchman, just to save himself from getting hurt. He reaches out to Dr. Zhou to check on the current situation. The doctor tells him things have gotten worse. Chun and his crew are barging into people's houses, devouring whatever they can get their hands on. They've been on the prowl every day. She mentions she hasn't had a bite to eat in 2 days and is nearly starving. Zhang Yi resolves he can't let Dr. Zhou perish. She's still highly valuable. Zhang Yi decides to offer her the opportunity to live with him, but he requires her to complete one task beforehand. Out of fear of dying, Zhou Peng went to knock on Zhang Yi's door, asking him to leave if he's not brave. Zhang Yi only frightens him more by describing how the infection is eating away at his flesh. Peng was furious and wanted to kill Zhang Yi, but upon learning that his own life was in danger, he gave up and returned to Yu Qing's room. Yu Qing thought Peng intended to harm her. Instead, despite being on the verge of death, Peng still proposed to her that as expected. Yu Qing refused. She wrinkled her nose in disgust at Peng. She slapped him, which he couldn't bear. He grabbed her by the neck, declaring that since he was going to die, they would both die together and love each other in hell. Yu Qing slapped him again, calling him foul-smelling and repulsive. Unable to tolerate her insults, Peng tightened his grip on her neck, blaming her for his impending death. Meanwhile, Dr. Zhou is all set to begin her mission, or else she risks becoming Chun Zheng's target. She offers to assist with cooking, which Chun Zheng interprets as a kind gesture, unaware of her true intentions. Chun Zheng instructs her to help the person cooking. While she's chopping wood, The cook decides to leave her unattended in the kitchen. Capitalizing on their lack of suspicion, she takes advantage of the situation and adds sleeping medicine to their food. Later, everyone is served the meal, and Dr. Zhou pretends to serve herself the unappetizing human flesh. Chun Zheng is pleased, thinking Dr. Zhou is now part of their team, as everyone begins eating. However, Dr. Zhou announces that she will eat in the kitchen instead. Dr. Zhou poured nearly half a bottle of sleeping pills into the food. Just one pill can make someone fall into a deep sleep within half an hour. Now, she's waiting for the medicine to take effect in their bodies. It didn't take long before everyone was fast asleep. Dr. Zhou took this chance to text Zhang Yi that she had put everyone to sleep with the pills and asked what to do next. Zhang Yi instructed her to move them to the balcony. After she finished moving them all, she felt cold and asking if he was going to finish them. Zhang Yi replied that he wouldn't do it himself. Instead, she would have to do the dirty work. He tosses a rope to her and tells her to get Qin Zheng's gun. Then, he instructs her to use the ropes to tie everyone's hands behind their backs to the railing. The woman says Zhang Yi is too careful and can't even assist her. Zhang Yi says being cautious is better than risking it. Dr. Zhou follows orders, tying the men to the railing. As she's about to get Qin Zheng's gun, Zhang Yi panics, telling her to take out the gun's magazine and give it to him along with the gun before stepping back. Dr. Zhou asked Zhang Yi if she could trust him, expressing concern about the possibility of betrayal. Zhang Yi's response was blunt. "You have no choice but to trust me." Immediately, the girl removed the magazine from the gun and handed everything to Zhang Yi. After confirming that it was Qin Zheng's gun, matching what he had seen on his security footage, Zhang Yi returned to his apartment without saying a word. He came back with a hose pipe and splashed water on Qin Zheng and his men. Dr. Zhou was surprised by Zhang Yi's intent to freeze people to death, but acknowledged that it was an effective method for ensuring safety. After getting soaked with water, Qin Zheng and his companions regained consciousness. Confused about the situation they were in, Qin Zheng soon realized they had been drugged. They were now shivering in the cold, unable to break free from the ropes binding them. Spotting Zhang Yi from the adjacent apartment, Qin Zheng saw him smirk and warned that they'd caused enough trouble. It was time to meet the King of Hell. Zhang Yi then doused them with more water before flashing an evil grin. Instantly, Qin Zheng succumbed to the freezing temperature and perished. At this moment, Zhang Yi tells the lady that she has passed the test, and she can now join him in his apartment. Dr. Zhou felt relieved about this and said she would be there soon. Without wasting any time, Dr. Zhou quickly reached the door. Zhang Yi didn't find any dangerous items. With his gun aimed at the door, he instructs Dr. Zhou to enter. She panicked upon noticing the gun pointed at her. As she stepped inside, she felt relieved by the warm temperature in Zhang Yi's room. It had been a long time since she had felt such warmth. Sneaking up behind her, Zhang Yi reminds her of some important matters she had forgotten. To prove she poses no threat, she asks what she should do. After a while, she finds herself fully naked in front of Zhang Yi. Pleased with what he sees, Zhang Yi tells her to go take a shower. He also informs her that he has chosen some outfits for her. After Zhou finishes her bath, she thanks Zhang Yi for the dress. Zhang Yi invites her to sit on the couch and then explains that he let her stay because she's important to him. However, he warns her that she must follow all his orders. He adds that if he catches her plotting against him, he won't hesitate to end her life. Zhou realizes Zhang Yi is a cold-blooded guy. Zhang Yi informs her that she'll be staying in the guest bedroom, which is under surveillance with cameras placed throughout the house. The room and the main door are made of the same material, and she can only enter or leave during specific times set by him. Zhou agrees to listen to him. While touching her hair and envying her beauty, Zhang Yi tells the lady that he's going to tell her a secret, therefore she must listen carefully. Zhou is curious. Zhang Yi tells Dr. Zhou that keeping secrets is crucial for building a cooperative relationship. He trusts her enough to share his secret because he believes she won't leak it, especially after witnessing how he dealt with those who wanted him dead. Zhou assures him that she understands. He continues by mentioning that she knows about gamma-ray bursts caused by supernova explosions, which are the primary cause of this snow disaster. However, from his understanding, Radiation can not only alter the weather, but also affect human bodies, granting them extraordinary abilities. At least, that's what happened to him. He suddenly summons a loaf of bread and reveals that his superpower is accessing an independent space. Zhou is amazed. Zhang Yi gives her the bread and tells her that the resources in the house are just a small portion of what he has. Most of his supplies are stored elsewhere. If he dies, those supplies will disappear with him. Zhou couldn't believe there were actually people with superpowers. Zhang Yi tells her to eat. She didn't waste any time and ate hungrily, adding a glass of water. Zhang Yi takes this opportunity to tell her that he doesn't fully trust her, so she should handle household chores without needing to be told. Zhang Yi explains that it's the maid's duty to exchange labor and food for payment. He then asks what else she can offer him. Understanding his implication, she begins undressing and replies, "I understand, master." They start fondling on the couch, but Zhang Yi is impatient and moves her to the bed, where they did everything. The next day, Zhou is still sleeping. Zhang Yi realizes he must have gone overboard with her last night. He wakes her up to eat something. After gathering her belongings, Dr. Zhou enjoys a burger in the living room with Zhang Yi, who watches her like a true master. He asks if she's done eating. She replies she hasn't eaten enough yet, but knows it's not good to eat too much at once to avoid stomach problems. Zhang Yi throws her a special jacket and asks for her help with some work. "What are we going to do?" she asks. He answers coldly, "Let's go smash that lump of ice." He passes the bat to the lady. She asks why they need to do this when the people are already dead. He replies that trash remains trash even in death, and this act will serve as a warning to the others. They need to know who the boss is now. He opens the glass door and tells Zhou that, for the sake of their unbreakable cooperation, it is her time to shine. Nervous, she tells him he's being too cautious. She then walks towards the lump of ice and begins breaking it. Our boy was busy filming instead of helping. Zhou asks if he is recording, and Zhang Yi confirms, saying he has to show the dishonest people in the building who the boss is now. Zhou continued smashing the ice. Later, the video was already circulating in the group chat. People were celebrating instead. They were happy that Chunjun was finally dead. Zhang Yi sent a voice message announcing that Chunjun was gone. From now on, this building would be under his control. People began praising him for getting rid of that devil. Someone took the opportunity to ask Zhang Yi for food, but he ignored the request after receiving an unexpected call. He was surprised to learn that his old flame was still alive. As he answered the call, Yuqing asked if he was seeing another girl. She then told him that since Chun Jun was now dead, she could come to Zhang Yi's apartment to stay with him, as he had promised her a lavish lifestyle fit for a slay queen. She added that Zhang Yi was not allowed to be with other women. He belonged to her, and everything about him belonged to her. Zhang Yi replied coldly, "You're not dead yet?" The girl misunderstood his intentions, thinking that Zhang Yi had taken in Dr. Zhou because he thought she was dead. She told him that she was still alive and that she was the one who loved him the most. Dr. Zhou meant nothing. He must kick her out of the house so they could be together forever. The other two girls were furious as they listened to her talk. They interrupted her call and started fighting while Zhang Yi could hear everything on the other end. Zhou told Zhang Yi that she wouldn't end up like the two cockroaches and that he must trust her. He was moved by this and then gave an evil smile, thinking that if Yuqing saw him with Zhou right now, she would be pissed. While the three girls were wrestling, Zhang Yi told Yuqing that she's a good girl, but unfortunately, she came too late. He had already found a better woman who was taking care of his needs. He then forwarded a cozy picture of himself and Zhou and asked Yuqing to wish them happiness. Seeing their pictures together made Yuqing very mad. She began telling Zhang Yi that she loves him the most and added that Zhou is just deceiving him and doesn't truly like him. She begged Zhang Yi to give her one chance to prove that she's the one who truly loves him. Zhang Yi replied with a very cold answer that put Yuqing in her place. He said Dr. Zhou and he share a genuine love and that Dr. Zhou is better than her in many aspects. "How could I even give up Zhou for you? Do you think you are worthy?" He added that she must not contact him anymore to avoid Dr. Zhou thinking that he has a side chick. Yuqing couldn't believe that Zhang Yi, who had always chased after her and devoted himself to her for a full 2 years, was now tossing her aside for a better girl. She blamed Dr. Zhou for snatching her man away, but her best friend told her that it was her own fault for being presumptuous. This was karma coming back to bite her. The other girl also added that she deserved whatever was happening to her. On the other hand, Zhang Yi expresses that he has had enough fun with Yuqing and sees no need to bother her anymore. He believes she'll soon meet her end in the apocalypse. Gently, he grabs Dr. Zhou's hand and asks if he's being too cruel. Dr. Zhou replies that she knows he has his reasons for acting this way, which pleases Zhang Yi, as he feels understood by her. Later, Dr. Zhou serves Zhang Yi a delicious lunch. Zhang Yi tells her to dig in first, since she was the one who cooked. In the committee group, Lin begins threatening people, saying that the snowstorm is almost over and that from now on, everyone better listen to her, or she'll line them up and shoot them. Zhang Yi is still surprised that Lin is alive, as she was Chun Zheng's first victim. While eating, Dr. Zhou wonders if Zhang Yi told her to eat first because he thought she might poison the food. Zhou explains that when she visited Lin, she pitted her and gave her some supplies. Zhang Yi stares at her in disappointment. Zhou tries to explain that she did that because she thought the storm wouldn't last, but now that she understands the situation better, she won't act recklessly again. Zhang Yi, after thinking, tells her that Lin survived this long due to the supplies she gave her. Zhou adds that the child Lin was taking care of passed away 10 days ago due to lack of medication. Suddenly, they both notice a guy laughing in the neighboring building. At that moment, the guy jumps off the building. Witnessing the snowstorm, Zhou asks Zhang Yi if it will ever end. Zhang Yi doesn't know either, as the changes in nature are beyond human control. What matters to him is that they must survive. Suddenly, he receives a call from Uncle Yu. Uncle Yu asks how he's doing. Zhang Yi tells him to stop being polite and get straight to the point. If there's something he can help with, he will definitely do it. Zhang Yi wants to keep Uncle Yu close because he's one of the few good people. He's loyal, honest, and skilled. Having him around will be useful in the future. Uncle Yu asks Zhang Yi for a favor. Xiao Li Mei's daughter is seriously sick, and they need some medicine at home. Zhang Yi thinks about how Uncle Yu has stayed single all his life. Li Mei, with her youthfulness and attractiveness, probably made the first move on Uncle Yu, who couldn't resist. Zhang Yi doesn't hesitate. He tells Uncle Yu to come by later to collect the medication. Uncle Yu is very pleased and thanks Zhang Yi, saying he'll help him whenever he needs it. Zhang Yi tells him not to be too formal, as he considers him like a real uncle since they've known each other for a very long time. Zhang Yi praises Li Mei for making such a bold move. In the whole building, only Uncle Yu listened to his advice and managed to stock up on supplies. It seems Li Mei survived on Uncle Yu's supplies. Dr. Zhou asks Zhang Yi if he has a close relationship with Uncle Yu. Zhang Yi replies that Uncle Yu is a kind and powerful person, and having him owe a favor could be useful in the future. After saying this, Zhang Yi takes a big sip of red wine. A moment later, there is a knock on Zhang Yi's door. Uncle Yu is there with Li Mei and her sick daughter. As he checks the surveillance camera, Zhang Yi wonders why Li Mei has come as well. Li Mei explains that her daughter has a persistent fever, and they need help with medication. Zhang Yi throws the medicine through a hole in his door and tells them to quickly give it to the child, because being sick in times like this is no small matter. Uncle Yu picks up the medicine and happily thanks Zhang Yi, but his bitch doesn't seem satisfied. She starts yelling at Zhang Yi, asking him to let them stay with the baby in his room, since he has a heater keeping him warm. Their house is very cold, and she begs Zhang Yi to show them some kindness. While standing by the door, Zhang Yi hesitates to help Li Mei because she seems like a gold digger. He tells her that during this critical time, he can't let anyone enter his apartment. Life is too expensive to satisfy some random gold digger. Uncle Yu also tells Li Mei that she should be grateful because Zhang Yi has been considerate by giving them medicine. Now, they just have to go back to their house and keep themselves warm. The lady starts yelling at Uncle Yu, claiming he knows nothing about the baby's suffering in the cold. Li Mei was not ready to let go of this golden opportunity. She asked Zhang Yi to help them for the sake of her child, and even mentioned Uncle Yu's name to persuade him. Zhang Yi didn't fall for the bitch's words. He told her that everyone in the building wanted to get rid of him and take over his house. He then addressed Uncle Yu, hoping he would understand why he couldn't help her. Uncle Yu tried to reason with Li Mei, but she was too stubborn, insisting that since Zhang Yi allowed Zhou to stay in his apartment, he must help them as well. Zhang Yi responded that Zhou is his girlfriend, no question about it. Zhou looked nervous and started blushing after hearing Zhang Yi defend her. Uncle Yu told Li Mei to stop bothering Zhang Yi and leave. This time she listened. Uncle Yu apologized to Zhang Yi and thanked him for helping them. Zhang Yi replied that it was totally okay. He understood. After a long talk, Zhang Yi complained to his girlfriend that having Li Mei around brought quite a bit of trouble. She agreed with him and started giving him a massage. Zhang Yi hoped that Li Mei wouldn't ruin his good relationship with Uncle Yu. If that happened, it would only harm Zhang Yi in the future. As they arrive home, Uncle Yu starts shouting at Li Mei for trying to take advantage of Zhang Yi to take care of her child. Li Mei replies that everything she's doing is for the sake of her child. Once the child is dead, she sees no point in living. Uncle agrees, but insists that she must know how to repay kindness. He points out that if it weren't for Zhang Yi, he wouldn't have stocked up supplies. Uncle Yu is determined to find a great way to repay Zhang Yi's kindness. Li Mei looks furious as she listens. She tells Uncle Yu that he shouldn't feel obligated to Zhang Yi, especially since Zhang Yi is still watching out for him. Uncle Yu asks why she is being so ungrateful to someone who helped her. She replies that it wasn't much help, just some medicine. She adds that Zhang Yi did him a small favor on purpose, hoping to get something in return someday. She also mentions that Zhang Yi killed a lot of neighbors, showing what a villain he is, and that his home is large enough for 3 people. While listening to the woman, Uncle Yu boiled with anger and yelled, "Enough!" He warned her never to talk about such nonsense again, calling her ungrateful. Li Mei apologized, claiming she was just looking out for Uncle Yu's well-being, and warned him to be extra cautious. The discussion ended with Uncle Yu deciding to sleep in the living room because he couldn't share a bed with someone he considered an ungrateful gold digger. Li Mei was determined not to give up. She planned to seize another opportunity to get into Zhang Yi's home, promising her baby that she would do whatever it took to ensure their survival. Outside the building, some men dug up the snow from the entrance and entered, ready to start a conflict. In the corridors, an unlucky man was walking with a bucket when he noticed these mysterious people. He immediately dropped the bucket and started running. The thugs chased him and struck him with a shovel on the neck, killing him. Their leader decided to leave the corpse and come back for it once they were done. The group arrived in front of Zhang Yi's door. Their leader confidently told Lao Luo to open it. Lao lit a bomb, placed it on Zhang Yi's door, and ran away. The huge explosion woke Zhang Yi from his sleep. He immediately grabbed his firearm and checked his iPad for the security cameras. He saw unfamiliar faces and realized they must be intruders from another building. Noticing their weapons, steel bars, axes, and more, he concluded that these people must be workers renting from the enterprise in the building next door. As the intruders returned to Zhang Yi's door, inside the house, Zhang Yi walked toward the door with his firearm. He realized that because they were targeting him specifically, information about his home had been leaked. The group leader criticized Lao for doing a poor job, saying nothing was destroyed. Lao defended himself, stating he had flawlessly prepared explosives. Another member suggested breaking the door open with their weapons. Zhang Yi was furious that they intended to kill him. He gripped his own explosive, a mix of chemicals that burned at over 1,000 degrees Celsius, and threw it out the door. Seeing the fire, everyone scattered. However, Lao and others caught fire. As they begged for help, Zhang Yi used his firearm to kill them, leaving them lifeless. Zhang Yi was relieved he hadn't bought a machine gun, as he would have run out of bullets quickly. He realized that the Ice Age had already eliminated most of the weak. That means future enemies would be tougher. He needed more powerful weapons to feel safe. Entering the bedroom, Zhou trembled in fear. Zhang Yi reassured her, and she, with tears in her eyes, pretended she hadn't been scared, saying she thought there was an earthquake and hid in the corner for safety. Zhang Yi retorted she would have been dead if it was an earthquake. She asked Zhang Yi what had happened earlier. She wanted to know if their new enemies were more dangerous than Chen Zheng. Zhang Yi answered that the man was only using the gun to intimidate regular folks. In times like these, the workers, renowned for their physical prowess, were certainly more tightly knit than outsiders. Zhang Yi felt relieved that they had dealt with the man who could have set off the bomb. Otherwise, they wouldn't have felt secure enough to sleep at night. Dr. Zhou questions about their next move, suggesting the possibility of retaliation. Zhang Yi agreed that retaliation was necessary, but stated he wouldn't personally take direct action. He emphasized the importance of having some individuals serve as cannon fodder if they wished for future peace. In the owner's group, people started asking about the loud explosion they heard. One person thought it might be an earthquake, while another thought it was a meteorite falling. Then, Zhang Yi messaged the group chat saying that earlier, a group of workers from Building 26 had barged in, trying to cause harm and chaos. He managed to stop them and drive them away, but unfortunately, Zhang Meng from the 10th floor was killed, and the attackers had explosives. Now a neighbor is worried about how to deal with the gangs, especially since many residents are dead, and most of those left are elderly, weak women, and children. The other person started praising Zhang Yi, saying he's a hero who ensures their future safety. Zhang Yi replied, saying he spent most of his resources fighting enemies, and now even his own safety is uncertain. He wished everyone good luck, then called Uncle Yu. As soon as Uncle Yu answered, he asked if Zhang Yi was okay and if the gangs from Building 26 were armed, and wondered if Zhang Yi needed help. Zhang Yi responded, emphasizing the need for caution for safety reasons, and pretended he didn't have any plans for revenge at the moment. This prompted Uncle Yu to inquire further about the enemies to plan a countermeasure together. He wants to team up with Zhang Yi to deal with them. Zhang Yi asked if Uncle Yu meant forming a group like Huang Tian to unite against outsiders. Uncle Yu agreed, saying it would improve their chances of winning. He added that he would suggest this in the group chat to see how many people were willing to join. Zhang Yi advised against it, saying people might think he had ulterior motives and get offended. Uncle Yu then asked what they should do instead. Why rush? We have enough resources at home. Just wait, Zhang Yi replied. He added that the Tianhe gang would definitely come for revenge since he had killed some of their members. When that happens, the neighbors in the building will naturally come to Zhang Yi and Uncle Yu for help. After hearing this, Uncle Yu praised Zhang Yi for his sharp analysis of the situation. After the call, Zhang Yi told Zhou he had something to ask her. Feeling scared, told Zhang Yi to go ahead and ask. Zhang Yi gently touches her face and tells her that, while the neighbors are flattering him outwardly, deep down, they all fear and hate him. There are some things he can't handle alone, so Zhou and Uncle Yu are now responsible for covertly gathering intelligence for the next few days. The sooner they understand the power dynamics in the neighborhood, the better their advantage. Dr. Zhou joyfully agrees to do her best. 2 days later, Zhou, dressed like an anime idol, reports to Zhang Yi about the information she has compiled from Uncle Yu and gathered on her own. Writing on the whiteboard, she states that the most challenging issue is the Tianhe gang from Building 26 next door. This gang is built around the core of the construction team under the Tianhe group. Their combat prowess is formidable, relying mainly on shovels and steel bars as their primary weapons, without access to firearms. The only other organization that poses a greater threat is 21. The two leaders, Wang Chong and Xiao Lu, were idling at home before the disaster struck. Their subordinates are generally young, strong individuals in their 20s known as the Mad Wolf Gang. After listening, Zhang Yi observes that there aren't many residents left in the other apartment buildings. This is likely due to either despair-driven suicides or internal conflicts caused by shortages of supplies, which have significantly reduced their numbers. Zhang Yi touches Zhou's shoulder, which excites her. He then encourages her to continue gathering intelligence, particularly about the firearms in their possession. This is crucial for minimizing the risk. Meanwhile, in the Tianhe gang's apartment, their leader praises them for doing an excellent job. Since they can't deal with Zhang Yi at the moment, they decide to take out the weaker residents in the building first. Messages started flooding Zhang Yi's phone. People in his building were scared and began blaming Zhang Yi for causing the mess. They insisted that he should take care of his own problems without dragging them along. One person wrote that the enemy said they wouldn't stop killing until Zhang Yi shows himself, urging Zhang Yi to step forward alone. Zhang Yi had expected the weaker residents in his building to switch sides so quickly. Zhang Yi replied in the group chat, saying that he didn't invite the attackers into the building and that he was simply a victim of their assault. He wondered why everyone was blaming him and involving him when they couldn't handle the attackers themselves. This led to everyone insulting Zhang Yi, which made him very angry. In response, he sent mean texts stating that he didn't care about their survival or demise and that nobody should lecture him about conscience since none of them were innocent. They had all attacked his home. He then sent a voice message warning everyone not to think he was afraid to deal with them individually. Someone in the chat asked what he should do, mentioning that he thought he was finally free after Qinzheng's death. But it seemed the Tianhe gangs were even worse and more ruthless than Qinzheng. Zhang Yi added that the snow disaster wouldn't go away anytime soon, and that everyone was going to die. After saying this, he called Uncle Yu and told him it was his time to shine. Uncle Yu joyfully agreed to handle it. Uncle Yu posted in the group chat, reassuring everyone not to panic because the Tianhe gang has only about 20 members. He emphasized that if they stick together, they can defeat them. People in the chat felt relieved by Uncle Yu's suggestion. One woman texted that she thought Uncle Yu might have died since he had been quiet lately. Another person asked about Uncle Yu's plan, stating they would all support him. Uncle Yu texted back, explaining that their resources were running low, they hadn't eaten for days, and they were too weak to fight. However, Zhang Yi's household was well stocked with weapons, and he was well-fed and capable in combat. Uncle Yu suggested making Zhang Yi their leader and added that he would try to persuade Zhang Yi to join them. Zhang Yi was enjoying his plans while drinking a hot cup of coffee. Uncle Yu texted him, asking what to do next. Zhang Yi replied that when the time comes, he would need Uncle Yu's backing to ensure everyone follows his lead obediently. By balancing kindness and authority, they could secure the safety of the building in the future. He then sent a voice message to the group, stating that for Uncle Yu's sake, he had come to discuss matters with everyone. He wanted everyone to understand his terms and conditions. One person asked Zhang Yi to reconsider, promising to follow his orders in the future without objection. This suggestion pleased Zhang Yi, who was enjoying a freshly made cup of tea from his girl. Zhang Yi asked if they were sure about their suggestion. A guy replied that they would comply as long as Zhang Yi didn't send them to their deaths. While waiting for a slice of cake from his sweetheart, Zhang Yi questioned the group chat if they would obey him if he told them to grab weapons and fight against the Tianhe gang. He added that they were basically asking him to risk his life, so why should he be concerned about theirs? Zhou served herself a piece of cake while listening to her elusive scammer making deals. The boy tells everyone to stick their neck out to be chopped off the next time Tianhe gang comes. He then says goodbye. Uncle Yu pretends to intervene and tells Zhang Yi that they will listen to him. Since they are all facing death, they'll do whatever he says to survive. Uncle Yu addresses everyone, asking what they are scared of, and says it's better to unite and fight instead of waiting to be killed one by one. Zhang Yi was getting royal treatment from his lady while listening to all the talking. The boy then tells everyone to obey his orders from now on. If anyone shows reluctance or tries to exploit the situation for personal gain, he will take strict actions as a warning to others. After these words, he ends the call. People began tagging each other in the chat to join forces. Zhang Yi intervenes, stating that the situation is currently worse, and anyone who hesitates and stays behind is betraying all the homeowners and deserves to be punished. He then tells everyone not to worry. Since he's the one giving orders, he will not let anyone go hungry. As long as they follow his orders, he will go out and scavenge for resources. Zhang Yi thinks to himself that if they want to fortify the entire building, they need to ensure that this group of fighters has some basic combat skills. He knows he definitely needs to go out and scavenge for resources and weapons to boost their firepower. Fortunately, he still has snowmobiles in his alternate space, making transportation for their outings a piece of cake. Zhang Yi envisions himself outside, thinking that in this era of heavy snow and city lockdown, it's very difficult for people to leave their homes, but he alone can freely move around the entire city. Someone asks Zhang Yi if he's sure about going out to get resources. Another person states that he will freeze to death if he dares to do that. Zhang Yi pretends to be a loving leader, stating that he's willing to risk his life for the well-being of his followers. He tells everyone not to worry since he has worked in warehousing for many years. He knows where all the warehouses are in Tianhe City, as well as the large department stores and supermarkets. Therefore, as a leader, he will go out to find resources. Since his resources are also running low, he has no choice but to go out in the snow. Everyone in the building was touched by Zhang Yi's words. People began regretting how poorly they had treated him in the past. They decided to make Zhang Yi their guiding light. Zhou excitedly told Zhang Yi that now people were eager to enshrine him. Zhang Yi replied that they were not his followers. They were just a bunch of cannon fodder. As he stood up and started walking away, he told Zhou that with just a tiny favor, these people would worship him as a deity. Zhou asked Zhang Yi if he was really going out. Zhang Yi got ready by putting on a bulletproof vest. He reassured Zhou that the supplies at home were enough to feed her. While putting on his anti-cold jacket, he told her that he was simply looking for the right chance to venture out and observe the outside world. His sweetheart asked if she could go out with him. Zhang Yi playfully teased her and told her that he trusted her with all his heart. He told her to rest and wait for his return. Zhou seemed unhappy about the idea of staying home alone. Zhang Yi begins walking through the corridors of the building. He opens a window on the 4th floor and jumps out into the snow. The atmosphere is very cold. He soon realizes that it's very difficult to walk in such thick snow. It's as if he is sinking. After looking up at the buildings to see if anyone is watching him, he realizes no one is, so he proceeds to summon a snowmobile. However, someone is watching him from afar as he drives away in the snow. While on the snowmobile, he anticipates that others will target him in the future to acquire it. After a long time without going outside, Zhang Yi is so happy that the first thing he gets to do is snowmobiling. After a few minutes, he arrives at the police bureau, which is half covered in snow. Since the door is fully covered in snow, Zhang Yi breaks a window glass and enters the building like a real thug. The atmosphere inside is cold, and he notices a bunch of police officers already frozen to death. Zhang Yi remarks that these policemen must have been on night shift when the blizzard hit and didn't even have clothes to keep them warm. Zhang Yi pays his respects to the people who once protected his city by covering them with a white sheet. Suddenly, Zhang Yi notices keys falling. He is happy because this means he now has full access to the arsenal of the police bureau. Zhang Yi didn't waste any time. He immediately checked which key could unlock the arsenal room. As he entered, Zhang Yi was bathed in light like an angel. The arsenal room was well organized, which made him even happier as he noticed the weapons. The room was filled with bullets, pistols, rifles, and even sniper rifles. While testing out a huge rifle, Zhang Yi praised himself, noting that since his rebirth, his mentality had become more stable, and his accuracy had greatly improved. The last time he dealt with Huang Tian, almost all his shots were flawless, making him consider himself a shooting genius. Without wasting any time, he began teleporting all the weapons into his private space. He believed that with such weapons, he could create a formidable team. Next, it was time to get some food for his followers. He decided to drive far from the city center to find food, since the supermarkets near residential areas were already stripped bare. He arrived at the rooftop of a mall and saw the glass roof. He decided to break in. He noted that luxury brands he couldn't afford before had now become worthless because of the Ice Age. He began teleporting some useful items before heading to the first floor, where the food market was located. When he reached the first floor, he noticed that after the onslaught of the blizzard, most of the food had been ruined beyond recognition. While packing the food, he felt sickened, saying he wouldn't eat it even if it were free, but he's taking it to give to the people he's trying to help. After packing, Zhang Yi hopped on his snowmobile loaded with resources and headed out. Meanwhile, the Tianhe gang observed him from their building. The gang leader suggested that if they could take Zhang Yi's snowmobile, they could scavenge for food. Another member corrected him, calling it an electric sledge. The leader dismissed the correction, emphasizing the need to get it from Zhang Yi. As Zhang Yi reached his destination, people watched from their windows. Uncle Yu, visibly excited, marveled at the amount of resources Zhang Yi had brought. Zhang Yi explained how hard it was to find supplies outside, having checked nearby supermarkets and malls with little success. Everyone was waiting for Zhang Yi in the corridor, with his sweetheart next to him and a gun in his hand. Zhang Yi told everyone that he had put tremendous effort into procuring the supplies he got for them. Zhou then proceeded to remove the food from the bags. Seeing the vegetables and meat, everyone started celebrating, chanting, "Long live Zhang Yi," and calling him their great hero. Some even wanted him to consider them as his little brothers. Zhang Yi opened his mouth and began addressing everyone, saying, "These food supplies will be distributed fairly, but I, Zhang Yi, won't tolerate laziness. Eating these food supplies means taking up arms to fight against the enemy." While he was talking, a group of armed thugs appeared behind him in the snow, demanding that he hand over all the food. This is the end of Chapter 50. While you're waiting for my next video, comment your favorite manhwa from 2024 to 2025. I'll pick the best ones and make a video about them. Don't forget to like the video. Zhang Yi pointed at the thugs and told his followers that anyone who killed a thug would be rewarded with food for 5 people. Hearing this, his hungry followers didn't hesitate. Their mood shifted, and they launched a violent attack. Even the thugs were terrified by the fierce response from Zhang Yi's followers. A brutal battle erupted between the two groups, with everyone fighting desperately for food in the harsh ice age. Zhang Yi and his sweetheart watched the clash, with Zhang Yi encouraging his followers, promising that the more they killed, the more food they would receive. Uncle urged everyone to join the fight, emphasizing that since the enemy was outnumbered, this was the perfect chance to defeat them. The leader of the thugs was tragically killed, causing the remaining thugs to panic and retreat. Witnessing this, Zhang Yi's followers were overjoyed by their victory. They lifted their weapons in celebration, knowing they had secured food as their reward. Dr. Zhou, observing through the window, was shocked. She noted that safeguarding lives required extensive specialized equipment and medication, and she worried that Zhang Yi might waste these valuable resources on his plans. Later, everyone gathered in the ground floor lobby. Zhang Yi clapped his hands and congratulated them on a job well done. He told them that as long as they stood united, there was nothing to fear. He then called 2 men forward and handed them groceries as a reward for their hard work, promising to treat them well as long as they kept up their efforts. The 2 men were thrilled, thanked Zhang Yi, and vowed to follow his orders. This caused the rest of the group to reflect on how foolish they had been for not working harder. They realized that if they had put in more effort, they too could have received the food reward. Noticing their worried expressions, Zhang Yi felt satisfied and flashed an evil smile, knowing this was the effect he wanted. He then raised his hand and called everyone forward for a small food distribution. Holding a gun in his right hand to maintain order, Zhang Yi distributed a packet of biscuits to each person. While everyone appeared unhappy, this was part of Zhang Yi's grand strategy. The more they worked, the more they would eat. This system would motivate the group to take charge in the next battle. One man, however, demanded to know where his food was. With a cold, indifferent expression, Zhang Yi kicked a small sweet to him, declaring it to be his food. The man complained, asking why he was the only one receiving a mere piece of candy. Zhang Yi coldly replied, explaining that the man had no right to speak up. While everyone else worked hard, Zhang Yi had noticed this man loitering at the back, doing nothing. Since he hadn't contributed to the fight, the candy was an act of charity from Zhang Yi. The rest of the group, who had received biscuits, mocked the man with laughter. The man tried to defend himself, claiming there were only 4 enemies and he didn't have a chance to act because of the crowd in front. Zhang Yi responded that he didn't care about excuses. Only results mattered to him. The man pointed at Zhang Yi, accusing him of being unfair and targeting him. "Fair?" Zhang Yi asked. He questioned who the man thought he was to speak about fairness and dismissed him, saying he had no time for such complaints. As he spoke, 2 of Zhang Yi's followers held the man down to prevent him from causing trouble. Zhang Yi called him worthless trash and warned that his disobedience would have consequences. Zhang Yi points his gun at the man and tells him this is what happens when someone disobeys the leader's orders. The 2 men holding down the victim begin kicking him repeatedly. As everyone silently watches Zhang Yi's authoritarian actions, he asks if anyone thinks he's being overbearing. He states that if they do, they can set down their food and leave with integrity, assuring them he won't cause any trouble. Zhang Yi is satisfied when no one dares to oppose his rule. However, the beaten man raises his voice and accuses Zhang Yi of bullying people too much. Zhang Yi stamps on his hand, grabs his hair to lift his head, and warns him to behave better in the future. He then addresses the group, declaring that their building doesn't need useless freeloaders. After distributing supplies, Zhang Yi announces the day is over and that the remaining food will be kept for later. A timid man from the crowd hesitantly tells Zhang Yi he never received any food, drawing everyone's attention to him as if he were naked. Yu Qing and his friend also plead with Zhang Yi for food, reminding him that he has always been kind to them. Zhang Yi approaches them and coldly states that they weren't overlooked. There was simply no food allocated for them. His words cut even deeper into the two starving devils. The two women couldn't believe that Zhang Yi would treat them so badly. Yu Qing, while crying, reminded Zhang Yi that he had said he loved her. Zhang Yi slapped her and told her that it was just a joke and she should not take it seriously. He also mentioned that he was currently in a relationship with someone who was way better than her. So Yu Qing should stop bothering him. Dr. Zhou blushes and cuddles Zhang Yi as he speaks these words. Yu Qing was in shock and embarrassed. This made the other girl start calling her a daydreamer. As if it was not enough, Zhang Yi insulted Yu Qing in front of everyone, calling her a gold digger and trash. He then asks one of his followers what Yu Qing's nickname was. Su Hao calls her all the bad words, which made everyone start laughing at Yu Qing while calling her a waste. This made Yu Qing furious and sad, causing her to run away. Zhang Yi rewarded Su Hao with a sachet of biscuit because he helped him to embarrass the girl he hates the most. Su Hao thanked Zhang Yi and told him that he'd be more obedient in the future. Zhang Yi's bodyguards kicked Yu Qing's friend out of the room. Zhang Yi then stands up satisfied. He tells everyone that since the troublemakers were gone, it was time to discuss how to strengthen the building's defenses. He wanted to divide everyone into 6 groups, each group made of 7 to 8 people. The groups would maintain round-the-clock vigilance to prevent attacks from other buildings. In case of any approaching threat, everyone should hit on the stairs railing or any metallic object to alert others. Zhang Yi reminded them that the reward for eliminating the enemy was still valid, food for 5 people. He then holds Uncle Yu on the shoulder and tells him he was in charge of arranging everything, to which Uncle Yu sincerely agrees. Outside, the snow was still heavy and deadly. While eating a sandwich, Dr. Zhou asked Zhang Yi how the situation was outside. He replies that things are still getting worse. The city is under heavy snow, and the lower buildings are completely engulfed in the snow. If this continues, even after the heavy snow ends and the temperature returns to normal, it would still take at least 2 weeks for the snow to fully melt. Zhou states that since winter is approaching, temperature drop is only going to get worse. Zhang Yi immediately stands up and starts summoning heavy guns. He reassures his girl that weather changes won't be a problem for them. Happy as he loads mags in his sniper rifle, he adds that in the last days, there's always something more frightening than the environment, even scarier than demons. No matter when, the greatest threat to deal with is always humanity itself. Zhang Yi walks out to the balcony, pulls his sniper rifle in a shooting position, and thinks this is a perfect weapon for assassination. He can't wait to find an opportunity to give it a try. While checking in on a sniper radar, he saw some people lurking in the garage, apparently looking for his snowmobile. During the day, he had pretended to put his snowmobile in the garage. This means someone was watching him and had decided to take the bait, but their efforts would be wasted. At that moment, Uncle Yu calls Zhang Yi's phone. He thanked him for the instant noodles and apologized for the last time Li Mei overreacted, explaining that she's just a bit loose-lipped. Zhang Yi assured him that he held no grudges. He also advised Uncle Yu to think about whether he was willing to raise someone else's child. Uncle Yu responded that, with his old age, he felt blessed to have such a woman. Zhang Yi tells Uncle Yu not to underestimate himself. In today's world, a strong and skilled fighter like him is highly valued. Zhang Yi added that Li Mei is also amazing. If they both put in the effort, maybe in the future, she'll be able to bear children for him. Uncle Yu replied that having children is not something he dares to consider at the moment, and that he'll think about it once he's settled down. Zhang Yi laughed, saying he was just joking and that Uncle Yu shouldn't take it seriously. He added that he genuinely respects both Uncle Yu and Li Mei and wishes them happiness. This made Uncle Yu so happy that he told Zhang he'd hang up for now and that Zhang Yi should feel free to contact him anytime. After the call, Zhang Yi tells Zhou Kuer that some things need to be taken slowly. Zhou, blushing, agrees. It seems the slowness Zhang Yi was referring to was about them taking it easy together on the couch. Meanwhile, in the first-floor lobby, a group of thugs wielding weapons breaks in. Just as they confidently start taking the stairs, a brick comes out of nowhere, almost hitting a guy in a cap, who is visibly surprised. Suddenly, a man upstairs holding another brick starts banging metal bars, alerting others in the building to fight the thugs attempting to steal their supplies. One of the thugs says, "We've turned the tide against them. They dare to throw things at us. Huang Wei, what's our next move?" Huang Wei orders his men to beat up Zhang Yi's followers. A battle ensues between the two groups, but the thugs are at a disadvantage. "You can't win against people motivated by food rewards for eliminating enemies," one thug remarks. Seeing his group struggling, Huang Wei orders everyone to retreat. As the thugs flee, one of the building owners wonders if they should chase them outside, but another owner advises against it, saying it's too risky without knowing the situation. Meanwhile, on the balcony, Zhang Yi observes the fleeing thugs and remarks that these starving wild dogs chose the wrong time to ambush them. He points his finger, speculating whether he can get a perfect sniper shot. Confidently, he summons a sniper rifle, aims at the thugs through the scope, and fires. One of the thugs collapses in the snow dead. His friend, shocked, wonders who fired the gun. Zhang Yi praises his shot, marveling at the rifle's accuracy and wondering if he's a natural shooting genius. As the thugs scramble away, Zhang Yi takes another shot, killing another thug. Excited, he loses his composure and systematically takes down the entire group. Watching their lifeless bodies in the snow fills him with satisfaction. Holding his sniper rifle, Zhang Yi declares that from now on, he can simply stay low and handle intruders from a distance. Zhang Yi's followers, hearing the rifle shots, speculate that he was the one behind the carnage. They are astonished by his ability to kill from such a distance, which ignites both fear and respect. They realize they must heed his words, as he hasn't lost his temper yet. Zhang Yi smiles, remarking that the gunfire has likely caused many sleepless nights. The next morning, Zhou Kuer prepares a meal for Zhang Yi. She warns him that it might not be as good as restaurant food and asks him not to be picky. Zhang Yi, relaxing on the couch, tells her to keep practicing since they have plenty of time. Tired of eating the same things, he's eager to try new flavors. Zhou asks if Zhang Yi was shooting from the balcony the previous night, mentioning that she heard gunshots. Zhang Yi doesn't hide anything and reveals he killed 7 enemies with 7 bullets. Surprisingly, this revelation excites Zhou Kuer, who praises Zhang Yi for being amazing. Zhang Yi asks why she isn't curious about his use of a sniper rifle. Zhou replies that it doesn't matter to her. She has chosen to stand by him, which is better than risking death outside. Zhang Yi praises Zhou for being intelligent and not unnecessarily curious, a virtue he greatly values. At Building 26, the boss is stunned by the sight of his men's lifeless bodies scattered in the snow. A subordinate asks what they should do next, as half their forces have been wiped out, and whether they should continue. The boss angrily retorts, questioning how they can fight people with guns. The subordinate reminds him that without stealing Zhang Yi's snowmobile and supplies, their group won't survive. The boss instructs him to wait until nightfall to retrieve the bodies. Back at Building 25, Zhang Yi walks through the corridor, where one of his men asks if he's heading out. Zhang Yi encourages him to keep up the good work. As Zhang Yi passes, the men silently think to themselves that survival in this building depends on not crossing Zhang Yi. Using an earbud, Zhang Yi contacts Uncle Yu to thank him for providing the location of the military camp. Zhang Yi delegates Uncle Yu to organize the building's residence and protect it while he's gone. Uncle Yu assures him he'll risk his life to guard the place. In Building 21, the two brothers were observing Zhang Yi as he sped across the snow on his snowmobile. They speculated about where Zhang Yi could have hidden the vehicle, as they had sent people to the garage yesterday, but it was nowhere to be found. The redhead declared that, no matter what, Zhang Yi's snowmobile had to come under their wolf gang's control. With it, they could venture out and scavenge for supplies, enabling them to expand their gang and grow their influence. His brother concurred, remarking that chaotic times produce heroes, and this era was their chance to rise as brothers. The redhead, however, added that their first priority was finding a pack of cigarettes, as it had been 2 weeks without smoking, and he felt like he was losing his mind. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi was racing his snowmobile at full throttle. He considered that unless the snow melted, the only available food sources would be a few independent supermarkets and the southern warehouse district. Although he had already emptied the largest warehouse in South China, other companies in the district might still have supplies. He accelerated his investigation of these companies, hoping to find something useful. Upon reaching the southern warehouse district, Zhang Yi recalled how hundreds of corporations in Tianhai City had centralized their warehouses there. If he could gather all the supplies, he could potentially feed thousands of people. As usual, Zhang Yi smashed through the glass roof of a warehouse and quickly discovered, as he had suspected, that all nearby supplies had already been transported. Despite his disappointment, he entered the warehouse to investigate further. Without delay, he began teleporting items he found, including heavy trucks, excavators, a Rolls-Royce Phantom, and bulldozers, none of which were edible or immediately useful. Still, he was pleased with what he had collected, thinking it might prove valuable later. While enjoying a fresh sausage, Zhang Yi reflected on his reliance on the snowmobile for daily transportation and realized his current fuel reserves might not be sufficient. He decided to head to a gas station to refuel. Upon arrival, he found the station almost entirely buried in snow. Frustrated, Zhang Yi threw himself into the snow, trying to strategize. He considered conserving his remaining fuel and lamented humanity's vulnerability, wishing he could use large-scale machinery for digging. Suddenly, he remembered the excavator he had teleported earlier. Zhang Yi quickly summoned it, knowing the snow pile, just a couple of meters high, could be cleared. With excitement, he filled the excavator with petrol and began digging, confident in his experience operating forklifts in warehouses. The task was much easier than manual labor, and Zhang Yi appreciated the time saved. After clearing the snow, Zhang Yi entered the station. Knowing that oil storage tanks are typically underground, he first removed any static electricity from his body before descending to the tanks. To his relief, he found 3 tanks of gasoline and 1 of diesel, ensuring he wouldn't run out of fuel in the near future. Zhang Yi sealed the tank's openings and celebrated as he realized his method of excavating snow could potentially work in other areas, granting him access to hidden supplies. He teleported the tanks, satisfied with his discovery. With fuel and supplies secured, Zhang Yi decided to camp for the night and return home the next day. Setting up his tent, he planned to visit a military camp Uncle Yu had mentioned. He settled into his sleeping bag and drifted off, sleeping peacefully. Meanwhile, in Building 25, a worried mother called Dr. Zhou to check on her feverish son, whose condition had persisted for 2 days. She begged Dr. Zhou to save the child's life. Dr. Zhou, still troubled by Zhang leaving her behind, knew he had taken the emergency medicines with him, although he had left some food. Uncle Yu brought over some remaining supplies, allowing Dr. Zhou to treat the child. Reassuring the mother, Uncle Yu promised that Zhang Yi would return soon and improve their situation. The grateful mother thanked them both for their help. As Uncle Yu and Dr. Zhou were leaving, the mother stood with her baby, watching them go. Suddenly, Lin appeared, enraged and wielding a knife. She accused the mother of living happily despite her own loss and stabbed her in the neck. The mother, still in shock, handed her child to Dr. Zhou and urged her to run away with the baby. She then falls and dies. Lin, still unsatisfied, screams at Zhou to hand over the child. Zhou pleads with her to come down and spare the child's life. Aunt Lin retorts that since her grandson is dead, this child doesn't deserve to live either. Left with no choice, Zhou tightly holds the baby and runs up the stairs. Aunt Lin, unwilling to relent, grabs Zhou's leg and pulls her down, ready to commit another murder. To make matters worse, she accuses Dr. Zhou, saying that since she couldn't save her grandson, she deserves to die too. Feeling hopeless, Zhou clings to the child, closes her eyes, and prays for a miracle. The miracle arrives when Uncle Yu intervenes, seizing the knife and shoving Lin aside. Zhou notices Uncle Yu's hand is injured, but he tells her not to worry and asks if she and the child are unharmed. Zhou responds that they are fine, though the child's mother was stabbed by Lin. Uncle Yu expresses relief that Zhou is safe, remarking that if anything had happened to her, he wouldn't have been able to face Zhang Yi. Zhou explains that Aunt Lin's survival was due to her negligence. She hadn't expected Lin to live this long after cutting off her food supply. Meanwhile, Aunt Lin, lying on the floor in fury, accuses Uncle Yu of being responsible for her grandson's death by not intervening when Chen Zheng beat him. She curses Zhang Yi, Zhou Kuri, and Uncle Yu, saying they all deserve to die. Uncle Yu yells at her to shut up, pointing out that Zhang killed Chen Zheng and saved their lives, and without him, they would all be dead. Zhou adds that Lin shouldn't blame Zhang Yi because he even tried to bring her medicine. Lin denies this, claiming Zhang Yi refused to help, leading to her grandson's death. Zhou counters that she begged Zhang Yi to help, but by the time the medicine was sent, Lin Shehu had already been killed by Lin's own actions. With that, Zhou and Uncle Yu leave. Lin continues to rant, blaming them for her grandson's death and denying all accusations against her. One of the onlookers speaks up, expressing disbelief that Aunt Lin would harm her own grandson. He accuses her of hypocrisy, saying her words about caring for him were meaningless. Another man reminds Lin that her son and daughter entrusted their child to her and says she's unworthy of their trust. He suggests to his friend that Lin deserves retributive justice for her deeds. His friend agrees. As Lin watches in terror, one of the men lights a lighter and comments that with all the fat on her body, she would make a great roast after such a long time without barbecue. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi wakes up and decides to inspect the military camp. Despite the extreme snowy weather, he follows Uncle Yu's directions and arrives at the camp. He summons his excavator, confident in his ability to start construction. After clearing the snow from the entrance, he wonders if the building ahead is a dormitory, meaning the weapons depot should be nearby. Entering the building, he finds it so empty that it seems abandoned. He speculates that the occupants evacuated before the snowstorm, likely transferring troops and supplies to safety, planning to return once the storm subsided. Returning to his excavator, Zhang Yi considers the potential threat posed by this group if they regain power. Determined to prepare, he breaks into the building using his excavator. Inside, he finds weapons stored in wooden crates rather than on display like in a police station. To his delight, he discovers bullets, sniper rifles, and grenades. After clearing the room, he reasons that the group must have taken some equipment during their evacuation, which explains why more than half the arsenal is missing. Though the remaining weapons aren't heavy-duty, they are sufficient. Exiting the building, Zhang Yi rides his snowmobile and analyzes the situation. He concludes that what he's collected will suffice for now, but plans to search for similar locations to replenish supplies in the future. Returning to the building, his followers are disheartened to see him come back empty-handed. Zhang Yi tells them he searched extensively, but couldn't find food and urges them to be patient. Frustrated, one man suggests he go back out, arguing that there are plenty of places with food. Another questions why Zhang Yi spent the entire day searching and returned with nothing. With a cold demeanor, Zhang Yi reminds them that they asked for his help, not the other way around, and warns them to stop complaining. His tone intimidates everyone into silence. Attempting to calm him, one man apologizes, acknowledging Zhang Yi's efforts and the challenges of searching in the snow. He urges Zhang Yi to rest. Zhang Yi tells everyone to go to sleep, but some remain dissatisfied. One man, angry, secretly hides a knife behind his back and warns Zhang Yi that going out alone is dangerous, suggesting he bring more people. Smiling nervously, the man notes that Zhang Yi's snowmobile can fit 3 people, adding that teamwork would speed up the search. Zhang Yi responds with a simple "oh." The man and his accomplices, pretending loyalty, assure Zhang Yi they are willing to do anything for him, even risking their lives. One wonders if they truly meant risking their lives or taking his. Zhang simply replied, "Really? What a pity." Without hesitation, he pulled out a gun and shot the first man, who had been hiding a knife, throwing the entire group into a panic. And then declared he didn't believe a single word of the nonsense they were spouting. Pointing his weapon at the next person, he He coldly stated that his kindness must have made it unclear who they were supposed to obey. Terrified, the man begged Zhang Yi to stop, insisting they were only having a discussion and meant no harm. He blamed his deceased companion for his own death and pleaded for mercy, assuring Zhang Yi that the rest of them had no ill intentions. Zhang Yi fired several shots, declaring that if he didn't kill a few people, they would never learn to behave. He proceeded to eliminate the group one by one, although a few managed to escape through a window. Moments later, Dr. Zhou and the others arrived at the scene. Zhou paid no attention to the carnage her boyfriend had just caused, focusing instead on his well-being. She asked if Zhang Yi was injured after being outside for so long. Spotting the corpses, Uncle Yu commented that these people had grown arrogant and forgotten who they relied on. Zhang Yi reassured Zhou that he was fine, calling it a minor incident. As they walked away, he remarked that he had always been a kind person and asked Zhou to forgive the men he had killed. He then suggested that they return to their very safe house. Li Mei was shocked that Zhang Yi could praise himself for being kind after taking so many lives. On the way back to their apartment, Zhang Yi analyzed the situation, noting that everything was nearly in place. He thought to himself that once all the cannon fodder was used up, he would have to clean up the mess. While resting and enjoying a gentle massage from Zhou, Zhang Yi asked if anything had happened in the other units during his absence. Zhou revealed that Aunt Lin had killed the mother of a child in revenge for her grandson's incident, but others dealt with her afterward. Zhang Yi commented that it was Aunt Lin's own fault and that she deserved what happened to her. He then asked, "What else happened?" Zhou mentioned that a person named Cheng Lingyu wanted to meet with him to discuss something. Upon hearing the name, Zhang Yi looked uneasy and asked what Cheng Lingyu wanted to talk about. Later, he stood near his glass door, contemplating the situation. There wasn't enough electricity or fuel outside to operate heavy machinery for demolishing the building. Depending solely on manpower seemed impossible. He wondered how long he could keep thousands of people at bay. If he stayed inside, they couldn't touch him, but if he ignored them, they might unite against him. "What should I do?" he muttered. At that moment, he received a message notification. A mysterious individual named Li Jian sent a series of messages proposing cooperation. Li explained that so far, only 5 elderly people had died in Building 18 due to the extreme cold. Through fair resource distribution, the residents had managed to coexist peacefully, which Li believed was the best way to preserve humanity's spark and aid post-apocalypse reconstruction. Li shared that Building 18 was in need of food and supplies, but was willing to offer manpower and materials to meet Zhang Yi's needs. They could also mediate between Zhang Yi's group and other buildings to prevent conflicts. Zhang Yi smiled as he read the messages and remarked to Zhou that this was exactly what he expected from a chief financial officer, someone skilled in management and profit maximization. He then asked Zhou if she was familiar with Building 18. Zhou replied that she had heard about it, and that its leader was highly influential, successfully uniting the residents and centralizing resource distribution to keep most people alive. Zhang Yi acknowledged their leadership skills, but remained skeptical. He declared that relying on centralized distribution for long-term survival was a fantasy in the apocalypse. Finally, Zhang Yi replied to Li Jian, stating he would consider the offer and respond later. Zhang Yi then embraced Zhou from behind and told her that there were only 2 choices left: war or reconciliation. Zhou smiled nervously. Zhang Yi added that killing them all would waste valuable ammunition and that most of them had no personal grudge against him. Killing too many would also take a toll on his mental health. Zhou began reflecting on how much Zhang Yi thought about everyone's fate, feeling relieved that she had chosen him from the start. Zhang Yi seeks Zhou's advice on his next steps. She is taken aback, as Zhang Yi seems to be toying with her during such a critical moment. Zhou responds that if war breaks out, it's better to be prepared to fight with confidence. Otherwise, even supplying resources to those controlling the buildings would be a heavy financial burden. Zhang Yi then asks if there's a way to resolve the situation without the immense effort of eliminating all their adversaries, yet still allows them to rid themselves of this problematic group. Blushing because of Zhang Yi's actions toward her, Zhou suggests relocating to a different area to start anew. Zhang Yi argues that it's easier said than done, reflecting on how his fortified apartment is deeply integrated into the building's structure, along with its abilities, making relocation nearly impossible. He begins wondering if there's another solution besides abandoning their current stronghold. A short while later, the two finish their business in the bedroom. Zhang Yi, now on the phone, watches as Zhou tears apart a bulletproof vest. She questions his intentions, and Zhang Yi explains that it will be used to protect her legs, emphasizing that everything must be bulletproof during preparation. With a grin, Zhang Yi sends several messages to the owners group, explaining that they are facing a serious crisis. He reveals that some people are trying to seize their food supplies by force. He shares that jealous neighbors, envious of his ability to venture out and gather food, are resorting to threats, demanding that he hand over his food and motorcycle, or else they will attack their building. Support quickly pours in, with two people expressing agreement with Zhang Yi's concerns. Another member, however, raises a worry. How could they possibly fend off a large group with only 3 or 4 dozen people? Zhang Yi responds, pointing out that they only have one snowmobile, so everyone must think carefully. His underlying message is clear. If transportation resources are shared, he won't be able to supply enough food for everyone, and survival will depend on individual contributions. One woman comments that they must confront the enemy, while a man declares that the food is theirs and questions why they should give it to other buildings. The rising tension in the chat pleases Zhang Yi, as he thrives in the midst of conflict. Soon, Zhang Yi receives another message notifying him that he's been added to a new group chat called Community Building Manager Negotiation Room. Chun Lingyu introduces Zhang Yi to the group, emphasizing the need for collective discussion on the issue. Wang Chong chimes in, accusing Zhang Yi of living comfortably while others are struggling, eating every day, and ignoring his less fortunate neighbors. Another member warns Zhang Yi that leaving the chat could have consequences. Li Jian interjects, urging the group to focus on cooperation and negotiation rather than hostility. Despite this, Wang Chong, still angry, insists that Li Jian inform Zhang Yi about the agreed-upon terms. Li Jian approaches Zhang Yi, explaining that after discussions with leaders from neighboring buildings, they've devised a reasonable plan. They hope Zhang Yi will accept it and maintain cooperation. However, they also warn that refusal will result in his designation as an enemy. The terms are straightforward. Zhang Yi must provide enough supplies for basic survival to avoid an attack on Building 25. Additionally, the snowmobile will become a shared resource for the neighborhood, with everyone taking turns using it. Finally, Zhang Yi must disclose all the supply locations he is aware of and share them with the community. These messages only anger Zhang Yi, who plans to deal with them all at once. However, he realizes this strategy could create security weaknesses. While he wants to eliminate future risks, he understands he must handle each issue separately. At this moment, he needs to think of a foolproof method. Suddenly, he has an epiphany. Facing 1,000 enemies alone is dangerous. It's better to capture the leader first. The next day, Zhang Yi prepares to go out with a plan to pretend to negotiate and lure each group's leader into a prepared trap to catch them all at once. Excited about his strategy, he decides to throw a grenade once all the leaders are gathered. Even if they survive, they'll be severely crippled. While heading out, he says, "Next, I just have to wait for the fish to take the bait." In the lobby on the first floor, Uncle Yu hands out food to everyone, saying Zhang Yi's food would energize them since enemies are coming for negotiations. Everyone must eat well to stay alert and protect their home. The group eats heartily. One guy with a drumstick says following Zhang Yi is the best thing in his life. Another, eating a burger, emotionally declares he wants to follow Zhang Yi forever. After eating, the boys ask Zhang Yi if they can return to normal life after the negotiations. Zhang Yi happily replies that if the negotiations go well and they solve the food problem, there won't be any more fights. This makes everyone emotional. Zhang Yi urges them to give their all for their future, hold their positions, and maintain order. Victory is near. As Zhang Yi leaves the building, his face turns cold and deceitful, thinking that wiping out everyone would ensure no future worries. Outside, it's still cold and dark. Suddenly, a large group of people appears, shocking everyone and angering Zhang Yi, who despises being tricked. One guy wonders why so many people showed up suddenly. Zhang Yi yells at the leaders to tell their people to move back, or there won't be a tomorrow. He calls Uncle Yu to warn him about the overwhelming number of enemies, expressing doubt that the younger ones can handle it. Zhang Yi then takes his sniper rifle, assumes his assassin position, and assures Uncle Yu not to worry as he will provide fire support. One man standing with Uncle Yu questions if the visitors came for negotiations, while another insists they're here to attack. Uncle Yu looks tense but calms his group, reasoning that if the enemy wanted to harm them, they'd have acted already. A blonde guy asks what to do, worried about facing the entire neighborhood. Uncle Yu reassures him, saying not to be afraid. The enemy is merely trying to pressure Zhang Yi into making concessions during negotiations. Meanwhile, the leaders are lined up in front of their people, determined to address the serious issue once and for all. A confident red-haired guy laughs, claiming their numbers have already scared off Zhang Yi's group. The pretty woman beside him urges him to stop wasting time, reminding him they need to discuss deals with Zhang Yi and secure his cooperation. Tian angrily demands to know where Zhang Yi is. Uncle Yu replies that Zhang Yi is upstairs waiting for them, then questions why leaders from other buildings didn't show up. Li Jian explains they had discussed matters yesterday, so it wasn't necessary for everyone to attend. The 5 of them came as representatives. Uncle Yu invites Li Jian and the other 4 leaders inside, but states no one else is allowed in and the leaders must undergo searches. Chen Lingyu feels upset about being body searched. Wang Chong finds it bold of Zhang Yi's group to make demands at such a time, saying he isn't afraid to die, even smiling as he says it. Zhang Yi listens to everything and reassures himself that the enemy can't scare him, especially since he has so many people at his disposal. While Uncle Yu speaks with Zhang Yi on the phone, Wang points his bat at him and questions why he's so worked up. Can't he see they'll easily destroy Zhang Yi's group? Uncle Yu tells him to shut up, silencing everyone. Zhang Yi positions himself where he won't harm his own people if he shoots. He blows a whistle, alerting the enemies, then confidently says, "Let's kick things off with a bang," and throws a grenade. It lands among their enemies, catching them off guard. Panic ensues as they realize Zhang Yi has a grenade. Uncle Yu forces the terrified Wang to listen to Zhang Yi on the phone. Zhang Yi asked him if he still found having a lot of people impressive. Uncle Yu then inquired if they still had more opinions. Wang replied that they had come to negotiate, so there was no need for this. In his mind, he wondered what was up with Zhang. A sniper rifle was one thing, but a grenade too? Zhang Yi told Wang that bringing over 1,000 people for negotiations was unnecessary. They were just getting in the way, so he was clearing them out. While walking back into the building, Zhang Yi informed them that it was almost 2:30, giving them 5 minutes. If they didn't show up within that time, more explosions would occur. Chen Ling pleaded with Zhang Yi, saying they came with sincerity to negotiate and asking him to wait, as they were coming right away. Li asked Uncle Yu which floor Zhang Yi was on, and he replied it was the 13th floor. Zhang Yi watched them from the top of the building's balcony. With a smirk on his face, he felt satisfied that he had killed at least 20 people with just a single grenade. It was effective, but with heightened alertness, achieving such devastation again might be difficult. As he prepared the meeting room, he reminded himself to be careful with how many grenades he used, as he only had 20 crates of them. Afterward, everyone gathered in the room, clearly frightened. Zhang Yi inquired if everyone present was accounted for. Li confirmed, saying they were all representatives. Zhang Yi suggested they begin the discussion immediately. Feeling somewhat disappointed, he realized that if he couldn't resolve everything in one go, he would have to resort to an alternative plan. Li Jian began speaking, telling Zhang Yi about the serious situation they were facing. Many buildings lacked basic necessities, and some residents were suffering and even dying from cold and hunger. If things didn't change, nobody would survive. Li Jian emphasized that nobody was targeting Zhang Yi personally. They were all just trying to survive and had no other choice. He asked Zhang Yi to continue providing supplies as agreed upon previously. With a smile, Zhang Yi promptly took out his gun and placed it on the table, asserting dominance. This action caused panic among the others. Wang questioned the meaning of this, noting that killing them wouldn't solve anything and the neighborhood wouldn't let him off the hook. Li Jian pleaded with Zhang Yi to calm down and communicate peacefully. Zhang Yi, seemingly oblivious to the tension, asked what was causing the commotion. He explained that he found the gun a bit cumbersome, so he took it out to air it. He reassured everyone to relax, urging them to sit down and continue negotiating. To begin, he explained that he couldn't agree to their demands. Supporting the entire neighborhood, which had thousands of people, was beyond his means. Moreover, those who controlled the building in this post-apocalyptic world had to be smart and self-reliant. He then pointed out that none of them were compassionate enough to share their own food with their neighbors. Everyone listened intently as he spoke. Zhang Yi also declared that he would set the rules for cooperation. If they refused to agree, they would end up going to war with him. The room fell silent as Zhang Yi asserted his authority over the adults present. Zhang Yi told everyone he would give them food, but only enough for 10 people in each building. They would have to sort out who got what in their groups. That meant he was handling the needs of over 300 people every day, which was already tough. Chunling thought this wasn't fair. She had nearly 100 people to feed, so how could they split food for just 10? Zhang Yi asked if she was saying there was no room for discussion. Tianyi stepped in, saying they needed to talk about getting more food. Wang agreed, saying 10 portions weren't enough to explain to their building mates later. Zhang Yi, loading his gun happily, asked if they thought feeding 300 people daily was too little. Li nervously suggested they reconsider and hear Zhang Yi's other conditions first. Zhang Yi, acting tough, put his leg on the table with his gun and said that if they wanted to keep going, they couldn't just scavenge forever. Nobody knew if the snow would stop. They needed to start growing their own food. He had found some seeds during his travels and suggested they start farming to create a steady food supply. Everyone looked at him like he was crazy. Tian pointed out that crops wouldn't grow in such cold weather. Zhang Yi said they had survived this long and couldn't rely on luck forever. Supplies would eventually run out. He suggested they send people to work on the land every day and show progress in farming. If they agreed, he promised to provide supplies and guarantee their quantity. He might even offer cigarettes, alcohol, clothes, and medicine in the future. After Zhang Yi mentioned cigarettes, Wang joyfully asked Zhang Yi if he could get cigarettes. Tian asked if he had any cigarettes on him so he could try one. He hadn't smoked in 2 weeks and was going crazy. Zhang Yi took out a pack of cigarettes and gave both Wang and Tian one. They immediately asked for a lighter and started smoking. Zhang Yi took this opportunity to ask the two if they agreed with his conditions now. Before Li could state his opinion, the two smokers agreed to Zhang Yi's terms as long as he could guarantee that he would have cigarettes for them. They both requested at least 2 packs a day. Zhang Yi replied, 1 pack a day, no more, no less. Out of smoke, the 2 men agreed to the boy's terms, and then folded his hands and asked the rest if they had come to an agreement on today's negotiations. Scared as hell, the 3 looked at Zhang Yi without saying a word. This made Wang angry, because these 3 losers were about to make him miss his chance to get cigarettes. He yelled at them, asking what they were waiting for. They had everything they needed, so they had to follow Zhang Yi's orders precisely. Li was still uncertain, prompting Wang to tell him to stop wasting time and simply follow Zhang Yi's instructions. He added that he hated people who couldn't keep their mouths shut. Tian reminded them that they now had plenty thanks to Zhang Yi's help, so they should reciprocate. Li thought it was foolish for the 2 of them to argue in front of Zhang Yi. Chen Yu reminded everyone that this issue still needed thorough discussion with others, and they should reconsider their decision. Wang yelled at her, saying the 5 of them would decide, and no one from other buildings would dare object. Moreover, they needed to empathize with each other. Zhang Yi had his struggles, and everyone had enough of what they needed, so they shouldn't push him too much. Looking out the window, Zhang Yi, with a cold expression, told everyone he needed to speak. After seeing what was happening outside, Zhang Yi became furious and immediately pointed his gun at everyone in the room. Then, Zhang Yi asked if the plan was for the 5 of them to negotiate while others attacked him. Wang replied that it wasn't their plan, otherwise they would also be in danger. Zhang Yi calmed down and told them to check on their people once the talks were finished. Suddenly, Li Jian announced that people were attacking downstairs. Zhang Yi told everyone to get down immediately while pointing his gun at them. Just then, Uncle and his team entered the room and restrained all 5 representatives. Wang pleaded with Zhang Yi, insisting they hadn't ordered the attack, and begged him not to shoot. At that moment, Zhang Yi had already set up his sniper rifle at the window, ready to retaliate. He was extremely angry, thinking these people had crossed the line. Using the sniper's scope, Zhang Yi targeted the barbarians, causing chaos outside. Without hesitation, he began shooting at the crowd, one after another. Realizing Zhang Yi had a sniper, everyone panicked and started dispersing. This didn't stop Zhang Yi from teaching them a violent lesson. He didn't spare anyone, even those trying to lie down to save their lives. Feeling like Rambo, Zhang Yi emptied his sniper's magazine as if he were in a war, killing more than a dozen people. The 5 representatives couldn't intervene for their people. After his little hunt, Zhang Yi started wiping his sniper rifle and asked the 5 people in the room if they had made up their minds yet. One by one, everyone raised their hands to agree with Zhang Yi's rules. After all, they had just witnessed him shooting into the crowd with ease. Good, he replied. Let's get to work then. Tomorrow, I will call you here to receive the supplies. He told them to go back for now and reminded them to do a good job and not do anything foolish behind his back. As the 5 people left the building, Zhang Yi's followers began questioning how the negotiation went and where Zhang Yi was. Zhang Yi approached them from behind and told them that everything was settled. One of his followers asked what he did to make them agree, while the other praised Zhang Yi, saying how cool his shooting was and how it scared everyone. Zhang Yi replied that it was just a small warning to their enemies. He added that from now on, he would provide them with 300 servings of food, and in return, everyone must do labor work, land exploration, and agricultural planning. This surprised everyone, but some doubted, asking if they would be able to provide 300 servings. Another person questioned what they would eat if they gave all their food to the enemies. With a cold, dictatorial look, Zhang Yi asked them what they would do if they didn't accept the agreement. He asked if they were willing to fight thousands of people in the area. Personally, he could handle his enemies, but he asked his people if they could handle them too. He then pounded his chest like King Kong and told everyone not to worry. He would do his best to find food and wouldn't let any of them starve to death. This emotional speech moved everyone to tears, and they began expressing that everyone's lives in the building depended on him. Another woman stated that Zhang Yi was the right person for the job. He was a great leader worthy of their respect. They vowed that from now on, all their support would go to him, and they would protect all of his decisions until death. All these words of glorification only made our little evil boy happier in his total domination. After everyone had left, Uncle Yu looked at Zhang Yi seriously. This prompted Zhang Yi to ask if there was something on his face. Uncle Yu replied that it felt a bit strange, since this wasn't Zhang Yi's usual style. Zhang Yi explained that cooperating with the others was only temporary. His original plan was to gather all the building leaders and then use a grenade to eliminate them. Without their leaders, everything would fall into chaos, making it easier to destroy the buildings one by one. He added that although only 5 leaders arrived today, they were the most powerful. Zhang Yi planned to cooperate for now and wait for another chance to kill them all. With wide eyes, Uncle Yu told Zhang Yi that he suspected he was up to something like that. When Zhang Yi asked if he understood, Uncle Yu admitted he didn't fully grasp it, but thought it was an excellent plan. Zhang Yi then told Uncle Yu that the food given to the enemy would be limited. If they couldn't share it equally, internal conflicts would arise. This way, they wouldn't even need to start a war. The enemies would fight and blame each other over the food. Uncle Yu praised Zhang Yi, saying, "These are called soft words that can win a hard heart," and called him a good strategist. Looking out the window, Zhang Yi said he could win because he had enough resources. He could easily kill them with his weapons. Besides providing shelter and protection for his people, those outside had no place to stay and no food to eat, meaning they couldn't survive or fight him. He added that even a wrestling champion would be defeated if he had nothing to eat for 30 days. Uncle Yu agreed with Zhang Yi's reasoning. Zhang Yi added that the starving people would never be able to defeat him. Uncle Yu asked why Zhang Yi had made them plant crops if the weather was too cold. Zhang Yi replied that it was just a strategy to weaken them. During this time, he planned to tire out his enemies and then attack, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Uncle Yu finally understood and told Zhang Yi that everyone's hope for survival depended on him. He promised to follow Zhang Yi's plan and observe quietly. Zhang Yi patted Uncle Yu's shoulder with a smile, telling him to keep today's discussion a secret. He instructed Uncle Yu to follow the plan and watch quietly. As Zhang Yi walked back to his apartment, he thought about the dangers ahead. Not only did he need to be wary of enemies, but also of the cockroaches in the building. When he arrived home, Zhou Kari was doing stretching exercises. She was happy to see him and immediately hugged him, asking, "What are the negotiation results?" Zhang Yi carried her to the bed and began sharing his plans. He told her that for the next few days, she must stay home and not go anywhere else. While gently touching her face, he assured her that after this period, all the trouble would completely disappear. The next day, a group of neighbors gathered outside. Everyone was happy because it had been a long time since so many people had come out. Before the blizzard hit, this area had been bustling. Someone announced that they should start working because their building head said the more they worked, the more food they would receive. Everyone was motivated to work together, as there was a food reward at the end of the day. One poor grandpa believed that a peace agreement had been reached and there would be no more fighting. He felt the future would get better and better. Meanwhile, Wang and Tian watched to make sure everyone worked. At that moment, Zhang Yi came out of his building. Tian asked if he was going out to find supplies and if it was okay for him to go alone. Tian offered to go with him if there was too much food to carry. Zhang Yi replied that he had a snowmobile and could use it to carry everything, no matter how much there was. He told Tian to wait until he brought the food home. Zhang Yi then told everyone not to be lazy and to work hard. He warned that if they didn't do well, they wouldn't get anything to eat. These words made everyone work as if their lives depended on it. After Zhang Yi left, Wang asked Tian where Zhang Yi kept his vehicle. Tian looked around but couldn't find it. Tian then realized and said, "It turns out that's called a snowmobile, not a snowplow." Zhang Yi stopped at a building dedicated to pets. He opened a box and was pleased with what he found inside, a blue bottle of medicine. He stated that once diluted, it would be colorless and easier to conceal than pesticide. After teleporting the whole box, he said this amount of medicine could kill 300 people. As he continued riding his snowmobile, he planned to first make the enemy let their guard down, then sprinkle rat poison on their food. After a long time, Zhang Yi successfully found food for everyone. He was excited about the drama that would unfold when people realized there wasn't enough food after working all day. As he entered the building with 3 bags full of food, his people were surprised to see so much. One person remarked that their food wasn't as much as the enemy's. Zhang Yi explained that he had gone far to search for it. The farther he went, the harder it was to get back. But given the special circumstances, he had to take the risk. One person agreed, saying it was too dangerous for Zhang Yi to go out every day to find food. Another noted that if the vehicle broke down, it would be even worse. A moment later, a group of neighbors entered the building to receive their daily food compensation. Starting with Building 1, Zhang Yi began distributing a bag of apples to each building. Afterward, Zhang Yi told the people that even though he couldn't put down his weapons, the hope before them was for a bright future. His words excited everyone. He then instructed them to go back home, as they still had a lot of work to do the next day. As they were leaving the building, some praised Zhang, saying that finally, they would have a nice meal and a good night's sleep after such a long, exhausting day. The evil boys simply watched them as they walked out. When Zhang Yi got home, Zhou was getting ready to wash clothes. She told him that dinner was ready, and he could eat right after taking a shower. While showering, Zhang Yi thought to himself that this state wouldn't last for long. With an evil expression, he decided that he needed to kill everyone, find a way to leave this place, and start anew. Meanwhile, one man brought food to Wang, who was excited about only one thing. The others didn't understand his excitement until he opened the food bag and pulled out his pack of cigarettes. He was thrilled that Zhang Yi had kept his word. The others demanded a cigarette each. Wang didn't want to share, as he smokes a pack a day, and sharing would mean losing half. As he overthought, his members grew impatient, demanding he share quickly. He had no choice but to share. While distributing the cigarettes, he told everyone they were hard to find and that he had taken great risks to get them. As everyone began smoking, Wang, though annoyed, reminded them they were brothers and needed to share. He added that they would have to work harder later. He then called everyone to share the food. The 6 of them began eating without considering the rest of the workers. Wang watched his people eat and realized Zhang Yi hadn't poisoned the food. As long as he had his cigarettes, he was happy to use his people for hard labor. One man in the building was comforting his wife, telling her that from today on, they wouldn't need to worry about the future anymore. Someone would bring them food, and they would work hard for it. This made his wife happy, and she agreed, saying their parents in heaven were blessing them. Everything was getting better, with no more starvation or massacre, and they would continue to live peacefully. The next day, while Zhang Yi finished washing his face, drama began in the neighboring buildings. The regular people were asking their leader about the food he had promised after telling them to work hard. They had worked hard but hadn't received any food the day before. Their leader angrily replied that they had wasted time with no results and dared to ask for food. Zhang Yi smiled as he listened to the commotion. While relaxing on the couch and eating breakfast, Zhou asked what was happening outside with all the noise. Zhang Yi simply replied, "Who knows? It has nothing to do with us anyway." Outside, everyone, both men and women, was working hard to avoid missing out on food again. Zhang Yi realized his plan was progressing faster than expected. He told Uncle Yu there wasn't enough food for the building and that chaos was likely. He advised Uncle Yu to be more careful and avoid trouble. Uncle Yu reassured him not to worry, as he understood. Zhang Yi then climbed onto his snowmobile and began his journey for the day. Later, in the building, Zhang Yi, as usual, held his gun in one hand and distributed food with the other. The recipients thanked him for being a hero who ventured out in harsh weather to find food for them, unlike others who resorted to cannibalism. Zhang Yi replied that they had suffered and asked about the food's quality. The person replied that it was very good and they had eaten and cried the night before. These words made Zhang Yi realize that only the leaders had eaten all the food without sharing. He reassured everyone that it was fine as long as they ate happily. He called them to come and collect their food. In his heart, he planned it would be their last meal before their deaths. The more, the better. What a boy! Later, in the buildings, people began fighting, calling each other liars, and throwing each other off the building to their demise. While chaos unfolded, Zhang Yi was in his apartment preparing his rifle and singing. More people were thrown off the building, and Zhang Yi eagerly anticipated the next day, loading his magazine while singing. The next day, Zhang Yi led his group of fighters to check the surrounding area. They noticed a pile of dead bodies in the snow. Zhang Yi analyzed that after the people were forced to jump off the building, some didn't die immediately. They were injured and tortured by the low temperatures until they perished. As he looked up at the building, he noted that last night had been hectic. Uncle Yu asked Zhang Yi if they needed to work today. "Why not?" Zhang Yi replied. He added that if they wanted food, they needed to work, or they would end up like the corpses in front of them. The idea terrified everyone, and they began working immediately. Uncle Yu informed Zhang Yi that no one from other buildings was cleaning the snow. He asked if they should call them out to do it. Zhang Yi replied that they didn't have time. Last night had just marked the beginning of the battle between the controllers and the commoners of the building. Unless they could solve the food-sharing issue, they would all die. Zhang Yi added, "How can they kill so many in one night?" This made Uncle Yu wonder if this was a way to take advantage of the enemy to eliminate themselves. As Zhang Yi was about to begin his daily mission, Uncle Yu asked what to do next. Zhang Yi replied that they didn't have to care. They must let the enemies eliminate each other. He then texted the negotiation group chat, saying that if he didn't see results tomorrow, there would be no food or cigarettes for anyone. The next day, Zhang Yi and Uncle Yu observed the workers and realized that 1/3 of them were missing. This happened faster than Zhang Yi anticipated. Uncle Yu asked why these people, knowing they wouldn't receive food, weren't fighting back to leave. Zhang Yi replied that they were eliminating each other to solve the food shortage. He added, if they had other options, they wouldn't risk their lives. Most people will only do what benefits them and avoid what doesn't. As Zhang Yi walked away, Qin Yu appeared and asked him to wait. She wanted to discuss the contract. Zhang Yi asked what she wanted to talk about. She replied that this place would collapse soon. Even if he brought back food, someone powerful would rob him, making things worse. Zhang Yi responded with a simple, "Oh, really?" thinking he wanted to see what happens. Qin Yu explains that she has a scientific approach to managing the city, with the potential for expansion. She suggests they team up to build their own empire, with Zhang Yi as the king and herself as his right hand. Recognizing her self-interest, Zhang Yi asks if she's serious. She agrees, stating it's the only way to survive. Zhang Yi then accuses her of deceiving people and wonders if their cooperation with her was in vain. He adds, "How do I know I won't be the next one?" He pushes her into the snow, telling her to perish alone instead of dragging him down. Chun begs Zhang Yi, agreeing to all his terms. Zhang Yi walks away with a smile. During his patrol, he's surprised to find no deaths among Li Jian's people, who are still cooperating. Li notices Zhang Yi and asks what he's doing there. Zhang Yi asks how he managed it, revealing that other groups fought fiercely for food. Li explains he didn't hide anything and announced the negotiation results from the start. Zhang Yi comments that his people will starve to death, thinking he's clever. As Zhang Yi walks away, Li asks for help, but Zhang Yi refuses. He tells Li that with his ability, he could win over a group that has the best chance for survival and share the benefits for himself. But he's too worried and ambitious to protect everyone. These words demoralize Li, who responds that he understands but asks what else he can do. Zhang Yi then meets Wang and Tian. Wang asks if the food is enough since Zhang Yi didn't go scavenging. Zhang Yi says he's on his way and will prepare food and wine. The brothers are excited. Wang praises Zhang Yi for his generosity and promises to help whenever needed. Tian adds that Zhang Yi is their savior and their lives are in his hands. Zhang Yi embraces them both, calling them brothers and promising to help as much as he can. However, these are just sweet, deceitful words from the Soul Reaper himself. Later, Zhang Yi instructs everyone to line up for food distribution. One man asks if Zhang Yi could bring them some cigarettes to smoke, noting they don't want much, just one pack per day. Zhang Yi tells them he will try and announces he will distribute cigarettes to all the leaders in the building starting tomorrow. Once the matter is settled, everyone disperses. One of Zhang Yi's comrades complains he's being too kind to the enemy. Another points out that giving them food is already a big favor, and now they're getting greedy by asking for more. Zhang Yi defends himself, saying he's not showing favoritism and their request isn't unreasonable. Everything will be fine. The two men are frustrated, feeling they work hard for little food while others live comfortably. Back in his apartment, Zhang Yi reflects that the civil war has caused at least 400 casualties, and the chance of internal conflict among them is low. If the situation drags on, it will be very disadvantageous for him. He clenches his fist and declares, "There's only tomorrow left." Later, as he prepares tomorrow's meal, Zhang Yi smiles, saying the final dinner will be a bit larger than usual, showing kindness. After putting on a gas mask, he poisons the food and beer, planning for his enemies to die together. Once ready, he smokes, contemplating how smoothly everything will end. He wonders if there's a spy in his building or if he's just overthinking. With a serious expression, he flicks his cigarette, declaring that with his weapons, no one can touch him. Regardless of their plans, deceit means nothing in the face of absolute power. The next day, Zhang Yi prepares to deliver the last meal. Uncle Yu informs him that everyone is present. "Good. Just wait here a moment. I'll call them down," he replies. Zhang Yi smiles as he calls everyone to come and eat. In his mind, he hopes his plans succeed. Devil. As he distributes the food, the other leaders seem tense, possibly plotting something. When Zhang Yi calls Building 21, Wang smiles and waits for his food. As Zhang Yi bends down with the food, Wang pulls out a gun and aims it at Zhang Yi, shouting to kill him. Caught off guard, Zhang Yi looks back helplessly. Wang fires several times, but Uncle Yu jumps in front, taking all the bullets. Zhang Yi is filled with fear as he catches Uncle Yu, who is falling. Suddenly, Zhang Yi's bodyguard attacks from behind with a stick aimed at Zhang Yi's head. Acting quickly, Zhang Yi grabs his rifle, surprising everyone, and admits his mistake. He vows it won't happen again. Enraged, he starts shooting at everyone, commanding them to die. Tian and his gang flee, confused about how Zhang Yi has a rifle. Zhang Yi continues shooting until he runs out of bullets, then discards the rifle and summons more weapons. He thanks Uncle Yu for taking the bullets intended for him and swears to help him seek revenge and kill them all. Realizing their lives are in jeopardy, Chun, Wang, and Tian beg Zhang Yi to spare them. Wang, the one who fired the shot, protests his innocence, insisting they weren't involved. They all plead with Zhang Yi not to kill them. But Zhang Yi is no longer the boy he once was. He responds coldly with a "so" and shoots them one by one. Chun Lingyu, the last one remaining, begs Zhang Yi, saying it had nothing to do with her, that her child is only 13. She pleads for her life, wanting to live, to wait for her. Before she can finish, Zhang Yi puts a bullet in her head. After eliminating them all, he stands and says, "Sorry, I'm not used to letting the tiger go back into the mountain." Everyone lies lifeless on the ground except for Zhang Yi. He remembers Uncle Yu and rushes to him, finding that he's still alive. Looking around, he retrieves an adrenaline syringe and administers it to Uncle Yu. He then calls over the two men who were hiding, instructing them to help carry Uncle Yu. Zhang Yi tells them urgently, "Quickly, take him to my house." He stresses the need for caution. Li Mei starts crying and asks what happened to her husband. She pleads with Uncle Yu not to die because if he was gone, she and the baby wouldn't survive. She wonders aloud what Uncle Yu was trying to prove by taking bullets for Zhang Yi without considering them. These words upset Zhang Yi. She asks him if her husband will recover. Zhang Yi reassures her not to worry and promises to do whatever it takes to save Uncle Yu's life. He mentions that his girlfriend is a doctor at a major hospital, giving them hope for Uncle Yu's recovery. Li Mei responds that if her husband dies, she doesn't want to live anymore. She tells Zhang Yi that if he respects her husband, he must take care of their child. Annoyed, Zhang Yi retorts that Uncle Yu isn't even dead yet, and she's already making plans for after his death. Li Mei denies it, emphasizing that she wants her husband to live. Zhang Yi abruptly leaves, leaving Li Mei to reflect that Uncle Yu was someone she deeply relied on. She feels Zhang Yi should take responsibility since Uncle Yu took a bullet for him. After arriving at his apartment, Zhang Yi tells Li Mei to go back home. He's about to perform surgery to remove the bullet from Uncle Yu. Even if she stays, she won't be able to help. Li Mei refuses to leave, insisting that Uncle Yu will need someone by his side, and she can't abandon him. After considering Uncle Yu's well-being, Zhang Yi reluctantly allows Li Mei to stay in his apartment. Once inside, Li Mei reveals her true intentions. She thinks to herself, "Finally, from the blizzard until now, I've always dreamed of living in Zhang Yi's house." While Zhang Yi and Zhou Kuri are busy attending to Uncle Yu, Li Mei is preoccupied with thoughts of the warmth, fresh food, and the in-wall heating system of the apartment, planning how she'll enjoy them later. To everyone's surprise, she promptly heads to the kitchen. Zhang Yi and Zhou are taken aback by Li Mei's boldness. With a cheerful demeanor, Li Mei asks Zhang Yi if he has powdered milk. Enraged, Zhang Yi demands that Li Mei repeat what she just said.